Thank you, Ricky. And okay, sir. State Senator, Windsor County. You have how many seats available? 3 seats. You got 2 candidates? And a write-in? 2 write-ins. All right, excellent. So hopefully, now that means you got to work to get those people out to get those write-ins in there. You got to do that. All right, and we had other hands. I'm going to knock this over before long. Aaron? Justice, okay, Justice of the Peace. Now, I was joking to Joe Benning back there that nobody knows this, but if you had food from that table back there, you're now obligated to run for Justice of the Peace. Did you know that? Wasn't that in the announcement? So talk to your town chair or talk to me after. We'll get you the paperwork you need. There's still time. August 12th is the deadline. We need justices of the peace. Who runs elections? Justices of the peace run elections. Are you 100% sure that the elections in this country were fair this last time around? How about Vermont? Are you 100% sure they were completely? Well, then we need justices of the peace, don't we? And who can be a justice of the peace? This is a commercial. Who can be a justice of the peace? Anybody. Do you have to be a legal person? Do you have to have a degree or be an attorney? No. Anybody at all. Justice of the peace. And we don't even need your consent. No. Let me explain. You don't have to sign a candidate consent form. That's what I meant. But, yeah. Brattleboro has 15 justices of the peace. Your town could have anywhere from 5 to 10, depending on the size of your town. That's how many people could be involved. That's how many people could be involved. So, Aaron, and I'm going to be running for Justice of the Peace as well. Okay, we had other hands up. Mary. She's running for Justice of the Peace. I may have to overcome the air conditioning here. There you go. There you go. Sir. Springfield, Justice of the Peace. Spread the word. And there's anyone else running for Justice of the Peace? Randy is, and over here, yes. Anna. Excellent. Praise the Lord. Okay. And we still have some more candidates. And Justice of the Peace. You just don't have enough hats, right? You just want more hats in the Gassett household. And Lynn. Very good. All right, we're not done yet. Mark? You're on the ballot as a Republican. Where? What?
Yeah, I'm Mark Chris, Westminster Town Chair, and I put people on the ballot for Justice of the Peace.
Yep.
I'm committee man from Wyndham County to the state party, and I'm running for Wyndham County State Senate.
As a Republican.
I can't talk about that.
All right. And then I'm also running for state senate in Wyndham County, and so we're hoping for the best. We've got several other candidates. So if Mark and I are elected, we'll have 2 candidates on the ballot. And that's what you need. And that's why it's so important up in Windsor to have 3 Senate candidates, whether they're write-ins or some other way, because that way they have 3. You have 3 votes, right? If you're a Windsor resident, you can vote for 3 people. That's why you need 3 names. Because what'll happen? What'll happen if you have 3 votes and you only have 1 Republican running? Well, you vote for 2 of the Democrats. You shouldn't, but that's what'll happen. Okay. All right, so now we had a drawing earlier as to the sequence of speakers today. We're going to have 5 to 7 or 8 minutes. Of course, what I just said was going to have 8-minute speeches. If we can slow them down. All right. And who is number 1? Who got number 1? Erica? All right. Erica's number 1. Who's number 2? That would be Greg. And number 3 is Gerald. And number 4, Myers. And then number 5, Joe. And number 6 is not here yet. No, he's number 7, but he'll go number 6 if Anya doesn't get here. She's supposed to come.
So this is really a 7 out of 6, we had a debate over this, I thought it was shorthand.
No, that's a 6. All right. Christina Nolan was invited, accepted, and then this afternoon declined, and did not choose to send a representative. So we actually had everybody scheduled to be here today. So at this point, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our first speaker. That'd be Erica. And what'll happen is after everyone's had a chance to make a presentation, then there'll be an opportunity for question and answers as long as we keep going, okay? I think you'll need the microphone because we got that thing roaring over there, so you're welcome to use that.
All right, excellent. I'll come. Are we using the podium?
I'm going to grab it back. My apologies.
That's okay. You can talk.
She smiles well. We have literature in the back table in opposition to Article 22. I don't want any of it here when I leave. You need to take one of each of these. Reasons why to vote no on 22. You've already got one from another time that you've met with me, fine. And then that's the only acceptable reason. And then this is my own personal literature. It's a door hanger. It's on the back there. So, okay, Erica, you go, ready to go. You can use this if you want.
Okay. I'm going to time myself because politicians, I don't understand when I come to these things and they don't give politicians timers. Like, you don't understand. We'll just blah, blah, blah forever and ever and ever. Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Reddick. I'm running for the United States House of Representatives. Thank you very much. 5 minutes is not a long time to get in a ton of information, so I'm going to breeze through a little bit of my resume. Born and raised in Vermont. I grew up in Milton, graduated from BFA St. Albans. I've been told I need to stop pronouncing my T's because I don't sound like a Vermonter. I'm like, I know growing up Milton was pronounced spelled M-I-L-O-N, but like I'm trying to use proper English now. So graduated BFA St. Albans, got my degree in accounting from Champlain College, and so have spent much of my life here in Vermont. I'm 44 years old this year, and I was blessed and lucky to move to Texas in 2010, where I got to see a really big difference in culture and governance and the way that they do things. Did you know that the Texas State Legislature only meets every 2 years and only for like 3 months? And that's for a state of 50 million people. Yet somehow our legislators for a state of 500,000 want to make it a full-time job. Now, I'm running for Congress, not for state, so I should be careful what I talk about. But I just think it's really funny. We then moved to Los Angeles. My husband is a filmmaker, and we got to do some fun stuff with acting and career moves in Los Angeles, and that was the totally opposite of Texas. It was the worst. We were passing people literally defecating on the street. I can't tell you how many naked people we saw sprawled out on the street. Power outage for 4 days in the middle of the summer. So it was like, okay, maybe this is a little bit too hands-off over here, but this is way too hands-on, and you guys literally have no idea what you're doing. And now we see those same policies that have been enacted in California being enacted here in Vermont and enacted on a national level. So we're now looking at food shortages because we don't have enough fertilizer. The cost of food is skyrocketing because of fuel and gas and all of those other things. We have a baby formula shortage. I thought we lived in a first world country. I don't know how that happens except intentional policy, intentional degradation of our constitutional rights, our constitutional values, the idea of a free market, of personal liberty. All of these things are being infringed upon by our federal government. And then we're confused and we're surprised that things aren't going well. Well, my goal as Vermont's next Congresswoman is to restore integrity, accountability, and transparency to the federal government. That is what we need. We need integrity. You need to know and trust that I will tell you the truth as I know it, no matter what. We need to expect the same thing from everyone in Washington. There needs to be some ethics rules implemented. Accountability and transparency. I want to see single issue bills. That's one of the first things that I'm going to push for my first year. No more of these 10,000 page omnibus spending packages where they can get away with being like, oh, well, I voted for it because there was this one thing that was really nice, while they allocate $14 million to throw themselves parties at the Wilson Center. Do you guys think that our Congress deserves $14 million worth of lavish parties right now? Me either. That's why I'm running. So I just want to first say my whole goal and my focus, I am a constitutional conservative. There are going to be things that if you are a diehard Republican or a diehard conservative, depending on your leaning, we're going to disagree because I am very focused on the Constitution. And that is one thing that you can count on from me, that when I go to Washington, I'm going to make decisions based on the platform and framework that we're supposed to be making decisions on, which is the Constitution. So that is one thing that I will promise you, and I'll be available. I will make sure that I can hear you, that we know what's going on and what is needed. What I will not do is promise you that I will take the money out of the pockets of your neighbor and give it to you or your friends. What I will not do is promise that I will infringe on your constitutional rights for some special interest group that asks me for it. Because I can tell you right now, as a candidate, every couple of days I get something in the mail from some special interest group asking, in what ways will you infringe on the constitutional rights of your neighbors and take money out of their pockets to give it to our people? And I'm not with that. So that is my platform. We're doing question and answer later, Rick, right? Is that correct? So yeah, that was my 5 minutes. I could, again, sit up here and blah, blah, blah forever, but I won't bore you. I want to get to question and answer as quickly as possible. So thank you all for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all later.
Hey everyone, I'm Gregory Thayer from Rutland, and I'm a constitutional conservative Republican, and I'm running on the Republican Party ticket to be your next lieutenant governor. I love Jesus Christ, and I love meeting all you people. There's a lot of you folks I haven't seen before, and it's really nice to see you tonight. I just came down from Barrie, where they had a Barrie Heritage Day. And there was thousands of people. I got to pass out 300 cards, business cards, and I got to talk with a lot of people. So it was really good. A lot of people. So I'm really happy to be here. Rick, where are you? Rick and Randy, thank you, gentlemen, for putting this together. I appreciate it. I too have an accounting degree. I have a master's degree in accounting, and I worked as a banker. And now I work as a financial auditor, and I have a small tax practice. And I started an organization called Vermonters for Vermont when critical race theory started rearing its ugly head. And we know it's been going on for a long time. It's in the schools. They can tell us it's not. They're liars, because it is. and it's killing our kids, it's polluting our kids, and we're seeing some of the results of this stuff that's been going on for a bunch of years. So we need to stand up, we need to rise up against this. So go to your school board meetings. The young lady, Ricky, that's running for the school board, thank you. Thank you. So I support public safety. I support our police officers, our men and women and their families in blue. We need to give them every tool that we can give them, including qualified immunity. We need to protect that tool for them. We also need to work on community policing programs. I served on the city council in Rutland, and in doing so, we used to go out with the police officers and meet with the public. What's coming up in a lot of communities, I believe it's this Tuesday at 4 o'clock in a lot of communities. I know we're doing it in Rutland, I believe Barry, I'm pretty sure Essex and St. Albans, and there's probably other communities around the state that are doing a national night out. And in Rutland, what happens with that are the police, men and women, are serving food to the general public. And there's raffles, there's giveaways. It's a really, really nice event. And we also need to protect school resource officers. We need to have police in our schools working with children and staff. I think it's really, really important. To me, public safety is the #1 issue of government. Other than that, government should be in the back seat because it's about you, we the people. My campaign is about we the people, a common sense approach to governing. And the people need to be in charge. People need to be in charge of their schools as well. And we need people like yourselves. You've done the first thing. You're here at this meeting. So obviously you have that in you that you want to know what's going on in your communities. So I would encourage you to rise up and run for the school board, run for the state house, the select board, because it's really important. The other thing is the economy. The economy is, you look around, it looks like everything's good. And then you talk to people, you talk to business owners, taxes, regulation. That's the biggest issue, is government's involvement and the over-regulation. That's the biggest issue, in my opinion, with our housing problems. And I've met with and spoken with a lot of realtors and developers, and that's a huge issue, is the regulation. And we need investment. And nobody's going to come and invest with all these taxes and all these regulations. It costs too much money. When Garvey Nissan bought the old Jerry's Nissan in Rutland, they figured they were going to get through an Act 250 permit in 90 days, 180 days. I told the gentleman, Mark, no way. You're looking at 3 years. And it was 3 years before they got to put a shovel in the ground. It takes a long time. And thank you. So we need to make some changes there. Real quick, on Monday night in St. Albans, it's on live TV through Northwest Public Access TV. You can get it on YouTube. If you go on the Vermont GOP website.org, you go on that website, you can get the link for the debates. There's 3 debates: the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House, and then the Lieutenant Governor's debate, starting at 5 o'clock. And the lieutenant governors are on at 7. So tune in and watch, and you can even submit questions. So a couple of the other quick things, I know Randy just gave me my 4-minute notice, is Prop 5. I want to see the defeat of Prop 5, and I am around the state talking about it. It's in a lot of my literature, and I've done some interviews on it. I've interviewed people on it, had people come into the Rutland studios and done interviews. Also regardless of what the NRA says, I am 100% pro-gun, and your right to own and carry a firearm. I think it's important. I've even gone steps further, but my time is running out, so I'm not going to get into it all. My website is www.fair4vermont.org. 4 is spelled out, F-O-R. My business cards are being circulated. So please, get a chance, go on, say hi, and we'd love to hear from you. I'll be around to talk with people, and let's think. Is there anything else? No, just the other thing. My biggest push. You got 3 seconds? My biggest push is that we need every one of you to call 10 people, 10. It's the Greg Thayer 10 call plan. And I've been talking about it for a couple of months, been talking about it a lot over the last 3 weeks. And 10 people, if you call 10 of your family and friends and ask them and give us a vote on the 9th of August. So God bless you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Nice job. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. That's my wife, Stacy. Thank you, honey. I wanted to say happy birthday to my daughter. Hannah turns 20 today. So she's not with us, but she's wonderful. And I can't say I have 3 teenagers in Vermont schools anymore, but I'll have to work on that. So my name is Gerald Malloy. I want to be your next United States Senator. Thank you. Thank you, honey. So my message today, well, let me back up. Just so you get to know me, I believe in God, I believe in country, I believe in family, and I believe in our Constitution. Not going to waver on any of those. Thank you. And I'm a Republican. And so my message today is I am going to beat Peter Welch in November. Yeah. And I know that's a bold statement, but I want to real quick, I think I only get about 5 minutes, but real quick go through some reasons why I believe that. First off, I've been campaigning like crazy for 7 months now. I think I've maybe met coming up on 10,000 people in Vermont, and there's about 15% that don't want to hear it. There's 85% of Vermonters that I've met that see we're being led in the wrong direction on purpose, and they're ready for change. So it can be done. I've had a lot of inspirational moments. I can tell you just recently I spoke with a priest, and he's like, we're at war. We're at war between good and evil, and I believe that. So second thing is I bring to the table 42 years of relative experience, service to our country, and that's military, government, and business. I'm a West Point graduate. At West Point, I embraced the values there of duty, honor, and country, served all over the world, nuclear surety positions. I'm a combat veteran, served in Jordan, in Korea, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, and Europe. I bring that experience to the table. I see our government and foreign policy, a lot of failure there. I look to have improved that if I become a U.S. Senator. After the military, well, a couple other things in the military. I did want to say I've done a ton of training for soldiers all over the country, including soldiers coming out of Vermont to go on different types of mobilizations. I want to say thank you to all our Vermont service members and veterans. Vermont answers the call. I appreciate that. So I did work in the Joint Field Office in New York City right after 9/11. Like I said, the world is a dangerous place, and I want to improve our foreign policy, which is failing right now. After the military, I worked 5 years in emergency management, so I've worked on 20 presidential disaster declarations, including several here in Vermont. Over the course of my career, I've earned a master's degree in business administration. I believe I'm the only candidate that has an MBA, and I went into business a little over 11 years ago. So for the last 11 years, I've been doing business development, and I've been working for different companies to provide services, mostly in Washington, D.C. area, highly competitive. What I do there is establish relationships, listen to customers, and develop value solutions to solve their problems. Very competitive, very cost competitive. I think I can take those skills and apply them to Vermont. A couple of things that are not happening in Vermont is growing well-paying jobs in Vermont. See, your Senate leadership, Congress leadership has not been doing that. I'm going to do that. I can tell you I have long-term relationships with a good 50 companies, that you've all heard of, plus a whole bunch of government organizations, and I'm going to seek to have them create jobs here in Vermont. That's what Vermont needs. Third thing, I'm a parent. So I look at like quality of life, $30 trillion debt, the inflation, gas prices, chipping away at rights. I'm not disconnected. I'm not going to be about 76 when I start day one as a freshman senator, okay? I'm feeling the same things you are, and I'm gonna try to improve the economy and quality of living here in Vermont. Last thing is, I'm a Republican. I'm not going into this as an independent or someone willing to cross the aisle or anything like that. My platform, you can look at my website, Deploy Malloy, abiding by the Constitution, returning to economic prosperity, and ensuring defense, security, and order. Those are the things the Democrat Party has failed at, and it's not a secret. I can tell you, even Peter Welch, for a guy like him, 15 years as a rep, to start doing full-blown ads in May, he realizes it, and that's one of the reasons I think I can win. If I have a little bit more time, I want to tell you one, just real quick. I talked about, here we are, we're in a war, and I've had a lot of inspirational moments over the last 7 months. One of them I wanted to tell you about was up at St. Albans, and spent the whole day up there at the Maple Parade, and then I saw a statue of the Gettysburg Address, and so I got around and I took a little selfie of myself at the Gettysburg, myself with the Gettysburg Address behind me. Spent the whole day there, got home late at night, and I looked at it. And of course, as you probably all know, Republican Party was started to end slavery. First Republican president was Abraham Lincoln. So I got home and I looked at that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And it's inspiring for me to this day, because what had happened, when I turned around like that, I didn't see it, but a little white girl and a little black girl were walking arm in arm right as I took that picture. And I thought to myself, this is Martin Luther King's dream happening right here in front of me. And I saw that and it was like, and it made me think, slavery, we took down slavery and we're in a war now. Good is going to prevail. And so I ask you to please get out and vote with your heart, and vote for Vermont and vote for America. May the 14th star shine bright. May God bless America. Thank you. Come on up.
Thank you, Jerry. How are you? My name's Myers Mermel, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, my qualifications for the job, and why I think I'm the right person to send on past this primary to compete against Peter Welch. I know that you're real Republicans down here. I'm across the ridge over in Manchester, so it's nice to be here. But my roots in Vermont are quite deep, actually. My people are buried up in Windsor County. They fought in the Revolution. My fourth great-grandfather fought with the Green Mountain Boys. My second great-grandmother was an indentured servant to the Governor Williams in Rutland. I came to Vermont. I was born on not an Army base, but a Navy base in Japan, and came to Vermont at age 17 to go to UVM. I did well at UVM, was able to be on 17 different committees, was president of the Senior Men's Honorary Society. At the end of my term, ran for student body president, lost by 14 votes, was president of College Republicans, did an internship with George Bush. And at the end of UVM, I wanted to stay in Vermont, but I didn't have the opportunity, like many of your children or grandchildren don't have the opportunity to stay. There were no jobs. I had a job as a refinisher or a job in New York. I took the job in New York because it paid better. And in New York, I've worked really, and this is my qualification for the job, I worked very heavily in finance and banking over the past 35 years. So I have real business experience, which I think is the most critical experience as we go forward in this cycle and this election. So in terms of my business experience, I worked for the Bank of New York, then I worked for Morgan Stanley, and have run a real estate finance and development business really since that time. In the history of my 35-year career, I've relocated over 300,000 jobs. That's about half the population of Vermont. So it's not that I think I can call on companies to do this. I know I can call on companies to do this. I think raising, part of my, if you've seen my website, is liberating us from failed social policies. The average income in Vermont is $59,000. The regional average is $76,000. We're $17,000 below our neighboring states, and that's because of these policies that, as you're hearing, like these new climate policies that hurt the working people, all of us working people. I have a strong economic plan. The first thing I want to do is reduce wasteful spending, like this new IRA plan that Manchin has just proposed with Schumer. The second is to cut taxes. The third is to remove price controls from meat, chicken, fish, and energy. The third is to restore energy independence. The fourth is to restore energy independence. Then behind that is to work with the Federal Reserve to sell assets. And lastly is to seek the resignation or termination of Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, who, quote, didn't see the path inflation was taking. If she had not bowed to political pressure, we wouldn't be in the position we are today with 40-year high in inflation, which is at 9%. It's unsustainable. I respect Mr. Thayer, but I disagree. Things are not looking good across Vermont. When I talk to people, they're telling me they can't afford to pay the prescription drug prices. They can't afford to pay for food. They can't afford to pay for their car. Now with rates up, car loans, mortgages, interest on everything is up. They can't put it together. And it's just not right. I mean, the Democrats always talk about social justice. There is no social justice in this. I should tell you, as part of what I did in New York, I also got a degree in American history from Columbia. And then as I've been back in Vermont since 2015, I finished a degree in theology from Yale. So I'm eligible to be ordained as a Methodist minister, but I haven't been ordained yet. There's a different ministry out there. There are other people, as what I'm finding as I've gone through my campaign, there are a lot of people that are hurting and that need help. And that's why I think revitalizing our economy is a key piece of that. The second thing that I'm very involved in is in crime. The Department of Justice is not giving crime statistics back to the state of Vermont. As remarkable as that sounds, once Biden came, and I've written about this in True North, and I would ask you to look at my op-ed in True North. Once Biden became president, all of our state statistics from state troopers have started to go to DOJ. DOJ has not reported anything back. If we're going to be in a position to identify crime across the state and allocate resources, we need to know where the crime is happening. I know I can see your stares at me like, are you kidding me? I'm really telling you the truth. It's incredible. So we have no idea where crime is happening across the state. We're not in a position to help the police because we don't know where the problems are. And this is a DOJ problem. And I have to say, you know, the lady that's not here today, Christina Nolan, this is the fourth, so she's another candidate that's running for state senate. And she's the anointed, candidate of the state party waiting for coronation. And this is the fourth time she's not showed up to candidate forums. So I would suggest to you, as Jerry has said, vote your conscience. I mean, vote for people that care about you to show up. And she was at DOJ when this all happened. I think one of the reasons she didn't want to show up is I started talking about her record, which she ran on. And when she left her office, crime was at a 10-year high. When she left office, drug deaths had doubled. Her signature achievement was a Purdue Pharma settlement, which New York Times called a sellout. So we need to be honest about where we've come from so that we can see where we're going. Opioid problems are obviously a huge issue. The last issue on crime is this qualified immunity or removal of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is basically like insurance protection around police officers from lawsuits. If it's removed, the Vermont chiefs of police all believe that 50% of the police officers will quit. So the Democrats and progressives have lined this up so there will be a vote in November after Act 254. I also wrote about this in True North. And so please look at that. What will happen will be a catastrophic defunding. So 50% of the people will leave. So Burlington doesn't need you now, right? But they're gonna need your police officers, right? And when there's a catastrophic defunding, we won't have enough police officers to go around. This is really a huge issue, and I'm surprised that other people haven't really focused on it. On just the basic social issues, I received the highest rating from NRA, which is an A rating. I'm pro-life. I'm against Prop 5. I went to the rally. I actually think we can defeat Prop 5 if we continue along the lines that we're working on. The last thing I would say, just to wrap up, as we confront this general election, it is really important that we think about where we are in this particular election cycle and where we are as Republicans. Now, we're supposed to be experiencing this big red wave, but it's not happening. If you look at what's happening in Pennsylvania, my 40-year-old friend Mehmet Oz is now down 9 points. Laxalt is down 3 points in Nevada. Herschel Walker, fantastic football player, down 3 points in Georgia. So all of a sudden, the Vermont Senate race is kind of important. If we want to continue the policies that President Trump started, if we want to see that his economic program comes back in, and And I'll tell you, like Christina Nolan will tell you who she voted for. And I always say I voted once for President Trump in 2016, and I voted for him 4 times in 2020. Pretty good, right? Yeah, I think that's funny. But in any event, he had tremendous policies and tremendous virtues. We need to restore energy independence. Obviously, we need to put the economy back on a square footing. I think we can do that, but we need Republicans to do that. That's why this is important. Now, why do I think I'm the one to go on and contest Peter Welsh? I think it's because I think I can raise the money. I've got $2 to $3 million circled for that type of race. I also have the right message. The message this cycle is about the economy and crime. And that's something that all the Democrats can understand. As you know, we're a minority party here. And the Bible tells us, right, when you're small, you have to be smart, right? David was smart. Jacob was smart. So we need to be smart about what we need to do to put people forward to contest Peter Welsh. They're 2/3 of the population. So in these Republican gatherings, it feels like we are the state. Well, we're really only 30% of the state. I mean, we're a 27% party. So we need somebody who can go out and convince half of the Democrats to vote for us. Now, the solution has been up in Burlington is just send people that vote and look like Democrats, right? And then they don't keep the Republican values, they don't keep Republican policies. So what I'm saying to you is I'm a person with Republican values and policies. I will stand still, and I pray to God, strike me down before I ever turn Jim Jeffords. I will not turn my back on you. I will not turn my back on Republican policies. And I want to carry those through in an incremental way. We can't have everything we want to win this election against the Democrats, but we need to get people there on the table, especially about pro-life. I mean, I had the head of National Right to Life say to me, what about the babies? The babies are going to die, right? If we're not at the table, Peter Welsh and all his ilk and the progressives are going to keep pushing that very pro-abortion agenda that they have. So I'm asking you to consider your vote. I appreciate your time. God bless Vermont and God bless America.
Good afternoon, everybody. Randy, are you my timekeeper? Okay. First off, I'm Joe Benning. I'm a trial attorney by trade. That means I get paid by the hour. So Randy, make sure you yank me off the floor if I'm going too far. I am presently a state senator from the Caledonia County District. I've been in that position for 12 years. That means that I have won 6 primaries and 6 general elections. A brief bit about me personally. Not only am I a trial attorney, I'm a father of 2 children, both grown. My daughter Emily is a first responder paramedic with the Hardwick Rescue Squad. My son works up the road in White River Junction, technically Norwich, as a machinist at NRC Concepts. My wife is a 2nd grade school teacher. In a public school, she is not a union member. I have served in the legislature in various capacities, but for the purpose of this discussion, I have been the Senate Minority Leader. I am presently the chair of Senate Institutions. That is the only Republican who is chairing a committee in the Senate. There is only one other person who does that in the House, so we are a very small minority in that role. I want to talk about a couple of different things. First off, the role of lieutenant governor, which is what I'm running for. Nobody has yet told you exactly what that means. It is not the governor. It is a role that has 3 basic functions. First, you are moderating the Senate. I have been the moderator in the town of Linden for 10 years. I'm a Jim Douglas appointed chair of the Vermont Human Rights Commission, and I've been the president of the Lindenville Rotary. Those of you who are Rotarians, I've been in Rotary since 1988. I have the skills necessary to run a meeting. I do it on a daily basis in the Senate, chairing the Institutions Committee. Secondly, the office requires you to appoint people to their respective committee assignments in the Senate, as well as the chairs of each of those committees. I know the players. I've been there for 12 years. I know who the players are and how they work together. More importantly, how they don't work together and who would be good chairs and who would not be. Finally, the role revolves around you taking over the governor's position should something happen to the governor. I am a Phil Scott supporter. I have campaigned with Phil Scott. I have worked with his administrative team on a daily basis. I know his agenda. His agenda is affordability, and we're about to hit that, given that all of that nice federal money is about to disappear. That's why I believe I'm the best qualified person to run for the office of Lieutenant Governor. A couple of things about my constitutional background. First off, I am a dedicated servant to the Vermont Constitution as well as the U.S. Constitution. When it comes to Second Amendment rights, there has been no person in the Vermont legislature who has fought harder for that than I have. There are 3 people in the room tonight who have an A rating from the NRA. Could you all raise your hands, please? So I got Myers, Gerald, and Erica. Anya, didn't even see you come in. 4 people in the room. Okay, there's 5 with me, but there's only 1 person in the room who has actually been endorsed by the NRA for having 12 years worth of trying to protect your constitutional rights in that regard, and that's me. I want to talk about a couple of other things. This is not my first trip to either Bellows Falls or Windham County. Some of you may have seen me years ago when we were fighting to keep Vermont Yankee open. Some of you may have seen me about 10 years ago when there was a proposal to blow up the top of the ridge at Grafton Mountain, to put 500-foot wind towers there. I was here leading the charge to make that not happen. More recently, you may be happy about the fact that 16 and 17-year-olds cannot actually vote or take office in the town of Brattleboro. You're welcome. I led the charge for that not to happen. You may have seen my op-ed piece about that in the Reformer. I've completed the 251 Club recently because I wanted to be able to say I not only have crisscrossed the state, but I've visited every town. I actually know where Guilford is. I will have to admit and confess, though, when I was aiming for Vernon, I took a wrong turn and ended up learning where Fort Dummer State Park actually is and had to turn around and come back the other way. I became a Republican because I believe Republicans all have 5 core principles that unite us: individual liberty, personal responsibility, a strong educational system that enables our graduates to compete in a global marketplace, a free market economy, and a smaller, refined government that brings less taxes. All of those things are wrapped together with glue called the Vermont Constitution. And I want to leave you with my favorite provision of that document. I like to joke at this point that I'm going to read you a provision. Watch how I read it to you. Chapter 1, Article 18, that frequent recurrence to fundamental principles and a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, and frugality are absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and keep government free. The people, therefore, ought to pay particular attention to these points in the choice of officers and representatives, and have a right, in a legal way, to exact a due and constant regard to them from their legislators and magistrates when making and executing such laws as are necessary for the good government of this state. Now, you may have seen some reports about people who have endorsed me for this role. Governor Douglas has endorsed me, Governor Scott has endorsed me, and that flaming liberal, as of yesterday, John McClowry, has also endorsed me for the race. So if you have any questions about who I am and you're afraid to ask me personally, I would encourage you to ask one of them. I would also encourage you to contact Gun Owners of Vermont, Darren Goins at the NRA, Chris Bradley from the Vermont Sportsmen's Federation. Ask any of those individuals about who I am and how I have worked in the legislature to protect rights. And finally, I have a 12-year track record which no other candidate here has. That's a good thing, and that's a bad thing. I guarantee you we will have differences about certain issues. One of those is I have been a pro-choice candidate. Always have been, and I respect people who are not. But I ask this for those of you that, as a result of that, are not willing to vote for me in the primary. Should I survive the primary, it is very possible I will face David Zuckerman or Kitty Toll, neither of whom will protect any of the things that I have just talked about. And if you are concerned about having to pay, in my case, $76 to come down here this evening from Lindenville in my little red sports car out front, I guarantee you those two are not going to be concerned about that at all. We have an affordability crisis. The federal money is about to dry up, and we've got to get ourselves back to understanding we need to live within our means. I believe Phil Scott, in vetoing the most bills of any governor, has done that because he understands that, and I want to be his lieutenant governor to help him in that process. With that, I will take any questions you like when we are ready for that. Randy, I have to assume I'm probably over time. Okay, thank you all very much. And Anya's here.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, and I know that it's difficult to find time out of our schedules to gather and talk about these issues, but they're super important. I just want to thank you for being involved in the democratic process as much as you are. It's very important to me, and it's very important to all of us. I'm going to start by saying that yesterday. My name's Anya Tino. Sorry, thank you, Brooke. Sometimes I forget to introduce myself. I'm Anya Tino. I'm originally from the Northeast Kingdom. So I had about 2 hours to come down here, and yes, as Mr. Benning was talking about there, the gas prices are really difficult to campaign with this season. It's one of the hardest things to do. Our president went around in 2020 and talked about how affordability was such an important thing, and now in 2022, the administration has no affordability, and no work is being done to bring it to us. I'm going to start with this. Yesterday, the House, almost all the Democrats and 2 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted against assault rifles. As we all know, there's no such thing as assault rifle. AR rifles are automatic rifles. So they did a gun grab. And almost all the Democrats and 2 Republicans joined them in doing that. And here's my promise to you today. I don't make empty promises either. I will never vote against your Second Amendment rights for any reason there is. I will not. I promise that today. I believe in the Second Amendment. I personally I believe that everybody should have the right to, shall not be infringed. That says it all. And we need to be upholding the Constitution. All politicians, whether they're Republican or Democrat, should be constitutional politicians. I'm a constitutional Republican. I have always been a constitutional Republican. I will always be a constitutional Republican. It's very important to me that we put politicians into office that are going to combat the rising inflation that we're facing in our state. We are facing a tragic level of inflation for the people of Vermont, especially when I go around to the rural areas. They are disproportionately affected. I bought a bag, a little bag about yay big, of rat and mouse food to feed a pet mouse for a little tyke. $9.99. When you can't feed our pet vermin for less than $10, we have an affordability crisis. People are paying $85 a bag for their dog food. That's not even talking about what they're spending on their own groceries. Try and go down and buy a roast, one of your cheaper cuts of meat. You're gonna pay at least $5.49 a pound. If you're not raising your own food right now, you're paying astronomical sums for it. And I'm not gonna stand here today and tell you that I can change that alone in Congress. Because if somebody's promising you that, they're just making an empty promise. But what I am promising you is that I will go to Washington. I will partner with the other representatives that believe as I do that we have an affordability crisis. And I will work as hard as I know how to bring about the most immediate relief possible for the people of Vermont. Winter is coming. People are scared about heating their homes. People can't afford to get to work, and they can't afford not to work. And most of them don't want to not work. I meet people every day, and they're good people and they're hardworking people, and they just want a quality of life. And that is our job in government, to not overtax and overregulate and outspend the quality of life. That is something that I won't do. How much time? All right, I'll wrap this up really quickly, because I'm sure I'm probably pretty close. Border security, very important. We must secure our southern border. We must secure our northern border better. We need to be helping law enforcement. Law enforcement is overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated in our country, and we need to be standing with them and helping them to overcome the problems that we face. If we don't secure our southern border, the flow of drugs are not going to stop. We have no idea who's coming in right now. We need legal immigration, and we need to stop illegal immigration. That needs to stop immediately. I'm a proponent of the border wall. I believe that U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts should be to the benefit of the United States and be effective and responsible. I'm not against it, but I don't think that we should be writing blank checks in society, just handing over money without getting the results that we need as a country and that would benefit the people that we are trying to help. I'm very much in favor of America First agenda. That doesn't mean we're ignoring the rest of the country, the rest of the world, but it does mean that as the American government, we're focusing on the American citizens and what's best for them, and I will legislate from that position. I look forward to having the Q&A and talking to you all about the questions that you have, because as your representative, that's my job, to represent your concerns and your questions. And in Washington, D.C., I will be the hardest working representative there. I promise you that as well. I'll read the bill 3 a.m. I'll vote on the bill at 8 a.m. I won't complain about the workload because, believe me, I work very hard right now, and it'll probably just be a slight vacation for me. I will say this also about law enforcement, that the understaffing level has led to a very severe problem. I spent the greater part of my morning dealing with an incident of robbery that had occurred at my place of business. And we had to wait about 2 hours for police response to come there. This is not a slam against the police. They are doing everything they can. They are that understaffed, okay? We have a very severe problem, and we must fund the police. I'm pro-military, pro-veteran. I will work for that. Homelessness, suicide rates of veterans, very important to me. We need to be making sure our defense budget is commensurate with the threats that we face from outside of this country, and I will do all of those things. Again, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. I ask for your vote on August 9th. I'm not asking for campaign donations. If there's cheerfully offered funds, I'm not turning them down. But I don't need the money as much as I need your vote. I need your vote to get to Washington, to go against Becca Balint, because I do think that it's actually going to be Becca Balint, and her policies will be disastrous for Vermont and the country. And just on a quick note, I'm Christian. I'm very grateful to be standing here in a church, and I want to say God bless you all. I'm pro-life, and I appreciate the opportunity to state that publicly. As Christians, we all know that we are called to openly profess our faith, and so today I want to invite anybody here who is Christian to join me in stating that we are blessed to be in America. We live in the greatest country in the world, and we owe that blessing to the Lord God Almighty. Thank you very much.
And that was Anya Tino. Back when I started doing this a number of years ago, I was always told the first thing you do and the last thing you do is say who you are. And I'm the only one. Everybody else just leaves. It's just crazy. My name is Brooke Page, and I'm from Washington, Vermont. The good Washington. Well, now I'm using it too much. Anyway, not enough? More? Really? Boy, I can hear myself real good. Anyway, so I'm from the little town of Washington, the good Washington in Vermont, not the bad Washington in D.C. And I'm running for 4 offices, and Rick tells me every office gets 5 minutes, and he's over there shaking his head. One thing I would like to point out, though, in the little town of Washington, we are 30 minutes from any state police office and 25 minutes from the county sheriff's office. So anytime you're talking about Second Amendment, we understand that the police are minutes away when seconds count, and a whole lot of minutes. So our little joke in town is when you're calling the police, remind them to bring the body bags and the yellow tape, because that's the only thing we'll need them for. In any case, we were talking about the current administration in Washington. I have the rare distinction in this room and probably in all of the state of Vermont, of being the only person that can say in 1972, I voted for Caleb Boggs. And nobody knows what that means. Caleb Boggs at the time had been a 2-term U.S. Senator. He had been a member of the U.S. House. He had been the governor of Delaware. He had been the equivalent of the Attorney General in Delaware. And he had been talked into running one more time. The Democrats really didn't have anybody. So they dredged up this rascal who was on the county council in Newcastle County, Delaware, to run against him. And this guy was just so disrespectful of Caleb Boggs. But it was the end of the Vietnam War, and a lot of young folks were all excited about this young guy, Joe, who was running. And sadly, young guy Joe eked out a victory over Caleb Boggs. And he's been circling around D.C. ever since. I know. Caleb Boggs was a wonderful country Southern gentleman, and it's sad he didn't get one last victory. In any case, let's get on with what I'm running for the 4 offices. I'm like the wrap-up guy here. I'm running for the 4 offices the Republican Party can't find anybody to run for. Let's list them in order. Secretary of State, which I actually want to be, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, because among other things, the Secretary of State's responsible for trying to straighten out, if I'm Secretary of State, all the mischief that the current Secretary of State has made in elections. In addition to that, Secretary of State is the scribe for the state. He's responsible for recording the records and the activities of the state. More importantly, he's responsible for the historic records of the state up in Middlesex at the archives, which are in total disarray. And since I'm involved in legal things occasionally, I have on numerous occasions had to go up to the archives. And when I've gone there, I've found that many of the records are infested with black mold because they were stored in the basement of the Redstone building for many years. So when I was working on my school merger, fighting school merger, I would have to go and I have to spread Benadryl over my arms and take tablets of Benadryl. Otherwise, I'd break out and I'd have these horrible red rashes and stuff. Recently, I had to go and get my town charter, the little town of Washington. We're one of 7 or 8 towns that still have their original charter signed by Thomas Chittenden in 1777. And so I went up there and they said, okay, they bring this box out. And they open this box and this tattered volume is pulled out. The bindings made out of leather is all shot and they're kind of piecing through it, trying to find the pages that were our town charter. And I said, oh my God. And every time I go up there, it's another thing. recently, Jim Condos decided that when they were closing the state library that was behind the Supreme Court building, that he was going to take over most of that. And so previously, the state library, you could go in, you could walk the stacks, you could find material, you could discover material that you need. Now it's all behind locked doors. Unless you know what you need, you're never going to find it. Third thing, Office of Professional Regulation. OPR under Jim Condos and Chris Winters, who I'm really running against this time, who's Jim's little minion, so we like to say Chris Winters is Jim Condos 2.0. OPR has become this giant tentacled octopus, squid, pick your undersea animal, and has gotten involved in everything. I mean, initially it was thought that that office would register businesses and fictitious aliases and do the mechanical types of things. And it's become all involved in overseeing these different professions. And I think it's like 45 professions. Half of them are in the medical field. Everything from nurses to tattoo artists to beauticians. And in my mind, at least, this is an overreach that should be under the Department of Health, for crying out loud. What's Jimmy Condos know about tattoos? I don't know if he has any, but beyond that, in any case. So I'm hoping that you will not write me. I'm the only guy on the ballot, so it's pretty easy to vote for me. I'm also on the ballot for Attorney General, okay, where the current Attorney General apparently headed out the door a little early because he got some nice gelt there from some gaming organization. And I wish the woman that was in there now, Suzanne Young, who's highly competent, was willing to run in her own right. But I think Phil Scott and her had a little deal that she's just there as a placeholder until somebody else shows up. So I actually have somebody who's decided to run. If you know who Jack McMullen is, you should know he ran for U.S. Senate, and he was in the state Senate for a number of years and things, and very, very competent person, ran against Sorrell one time out. So I've got that one kind of locked in. Once I get it in the primary, then hopefully he'll be able to run in the general election. Yeah? Okay. It didn't feel like 20 minutes to me, Rick. Anyway. State treasurer, we're still working on that a little bit. I have somebody in mind, but we're still chumming the waters looking for candidates. And then auditor of accounts. We want to get Doug Hoffer out of there really bad. And I have a wonderful lady. She's not exactly a Republican, but she's a very conservative person from over to Dorset. Linda Joy Sullivan. Hopefully some of you have heard of her. No? Okay. Oh yeah, what are you giving me a down on that? Okay. Everybody's in. So you have a better candidate for me, right? No. Okay. See how this works. Linda Joy is involved in federal bankruptcy courts as far as investigating the outcomes for things of that nature. Is highly competent for an individual and has a extensive resume. So I should explain how all this works briefly. That you're right behind me. You got a knife back here? Anyway, because I'm the only one on the ballot, will win the primary, hopefully. And after I do so, then I will withdraw from those races once the Republican Party has secured them in the party's name for the general election. And then the statewide committee will then vote on who will replace me for those offices. And if they have no one, it's our agreement that they'll put me back on the ballot, because I don't think that anyone in the general election should get to run unopposed and just have a clear, track to victory. Anyway, my name is Brooke Page from the little town of Washington, Vermont, and I hope that you will vote for me both in August and in November, and I will be here to answer all of your questions in a few moments. Thank you ever so much. God bless you, God bless Vermont, and God bless America. And Rich.
Oh, wait, we're gonna Actually, what Brooke is doing is a very loyal thing to do for the party. He's basically becoming a placeholder in 4 positions the party had not been able to find a candidate for. So he will win the primary. And then he can work with the party in determining who actually can be nominated to fill that role. Ideally, it should not have to go that way, but it has recently. That's the problem the Republican Party has had. We need to find candidates to run the 150 state representatives. We don't have even 100. So we give away 50, 60, whatever the number is. And we don't want to do that with justices of the peace. Okay, so now at this point, we'd like to have the candidates come up. You could sit here perhaps, that's what the thought was. We are probably going to go by office. So if you could just grab a spot here, we'll determine which office is going to go first. And then those candidates can come up and take a few minutes of questions. Shall we? Not sure which direction to go here. Let's do that. We'll have Greg and Joe come up, and rather than pass the microphone back and forth, standing here, why don't you take a seat? Can we get everybody up here? Well, need some more chairs. All right, we'll do that. We'll be flexible. We'll get the piano bench or something. Get everybody up there.
Is this one on? Oh, it is on.
And do we have more than one microphone? We got a good comfy chair back there. We need to bring that forward. Let's give it a shot.
Hello?
The green? Is they working? Give it a tap. I'm not getting any sound.
We have one here.
Hmm?
We do have another one here.
All right.
This one's on. Hello.
All right. So, gentlemen, why don't you grab a seat? We will have at least 2 microphones. We can move back and forth. Okay. This solves the problem. Joe and.
Yeah, he's good.
Testing. Check. 1.
I just want to make an initial comment here. We're headed to a primary. We're going to make a choice. This is important, and we have to make a real choice. But I want to say that however the primary comes out, that we're going to still have strong candidates for November. And I'm very happy about that. All right. So now we're gonna open it up to questions. I'm not sure how we're gonna handle the microphone down here.
You'll tell how well we'll do in office by
Yeah.
figure out the microphone.
Look, you're gonna have you got a microphone? That's working?
Yes, it is.
All right. So, here. I want to start off with the first question.
Hey, Rick, before we get started, can I just do a shout out to Pastor Matthew and Pastor Brenda for everything. We really and greatly appreciate it for having us here today. And the technical folks up top there, thank you.
And actually, we'll put a plate, there's a plate back there, if you're willing to contribute towards there. They put the food together, so that would be nice if you could help them with that. All right, so the first question, and again, this really applies to any of you. What is the most significant issue in Vermont that you can address as one of
Inflation and affordability. That is number one. I think that what we're struggling with and the prices that we're facing and the fact that no effort is being made to combat that currently in Washington, it's kind of just like a you're on your own deal. That needs to be addressed, and that's going to be something I focus on very hard.
Well, I was going to add to that a little bit. Thanks, Anya. The overspending by the Biden administration is causing the inflation. So if I were to get into office, and hopefully I will, to actually get some discipline back, so we're not printing off money. If you took economics from Milton Friedman, you realize if you do that, you are going to get inflation, and that's where we are now, actually recession, and 9.1% is where we're at. So stop the overspending. I also think that I call it President Biden's, the president's crusade to kill the oil and gas industry. That is actually causing the gas prices. So I would look to overturn that executive order, which I think is unconstitutional one way or another. So those two things would lower the prices.
The things that have already been mentioned would be great. I think one of the other things that would be the most impactful here, particularly in Vermont, is securing our southern border. We saw the highest increase in drug overdose deaths in the country. So with our opioid crisis that we are facing and unconscionable amounts of fentanyl crossing our southern border, not to mention people being human trafficked, sex trafficked, and that's actually happening here in Vermont as well. So 2 sex trafficking rings were busted in Chittenden County in the last couple of years. And these are illegal immigrants, many of them, being brought here to be trafficked here in Vermont. Or we have our drug-addicted girls being brought to places like New York City and Springfield, Mass, where they're being prostituted. So the best thing, probably the most impactful thing I think that I can do, or that we can do in Washington, is secure our southern border. My nephew is a Border Patrol agent in South Texas, and so I knew that there was a crisis on our southern border long before Donald Trump went down the golden escalator and everyone called him a racist for pointing out the problem. So that will be something I look forward to working on in Congress.
Myers Mermel on the issue. Really, the issue is the economy, and the biggest part of that for Vermonters is inflation. About 3/4 of the inflation that we're experiencing is because of heightened energy prices. Now, you may have noticed at the pump's probably gone down about 50 or 60 cents. And of course, the Democrats are saying that's all because of them. And it is a little bit because of them, because your president, Biden, made a deal with Saudi Arabia in June, which he finalized with the fist bump. And what they did, which is OPEC Plus, they have increased their supply of crude oil in July and August by 50%. OPEC Plus is the old OPEC countries, if you remember from the 70s, plus Russia. So this is Russian fuel that's coming through Saudi Arabia, courtesy of the Biden administration. But of course, we're against Russia. But in July and August, the deal was made to increase crude oil supply from OPEC. So what you're seeing is refined prices have come down in gasoline, but those prices will probably only be down in July and August. As a senator, what I want to do is reintroduce the Trump Energy Independence Plan, right, to lift these regulations. There was a recent ruling from the Supreme Court, and thank God for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was really looking at the unitary executive, this idea that the executive has all control over its agencies. And a lot's been written about this, from early days in the Constitution. These agencies like EPA exist, and how do they make these rules which have the force of law? But the Supreme Court said in certain instances, these don't, so those are being pushed back to Congress. So what I will do as a senator is to make sure that we get control of these agencies, get control of the deep state, get control of these regulations, so that our energy companies can begin to reinvest in establishing energy independence here. This idea that there's no energy is not true. There's 300 years of energy under the shale in Pennsylvania alone, and we can do it in an environmentally sensitive way. There's also the issue of nuclear. Nobody wants to talk about nuclear. Nuclear is very clean without any accidents, but there are a number of other alternatives that we can explore that would help us. So that would be my focus.
I would say, Rick, that, or argue that this is, has to do with state issues too, and what we'll do at the state level, because what the feds do and what we do, and we've got some things going on in the state with the Global Warming Solutions Act that is going to devastate and kill the working family. So I think that it's very important that we cut regulation, cut what some of the things that are coming out. The federal government's the federal government, but we have to be responsible as state legislators as well. And that's why we need to get good people like Dana Colson and my buddy right there. We need to get her in office, and a lot of you other folks that are running, because we need good mind thinking in Montpelier under the Gold Dome, not what's been going on with the Democratic leadership. And again, we need everyone helping. So thank you.
So, Rick, I'm going to join Greg in having an answer to this question, because if we are waiting for Washington, we are passing up an opportunity for all of us in this room. One of the things that I have to tell you about the lieutenant governor's position is you cannot draft legislation, you cannot vote on legislation unless there's a tie on the floor, you cannot go into committee and argue for legislation. You are stuck waiting for the legislators themselves to advance legislation. But what can a lieutenant governor do? If the lieutenant governor is going around the state trying to coordinate businesses and get those businesses into the legislature to introduce them to the players who may be able to assist with things like correcting Act 250, that's a role that the lieutenant governor can and should be playing. There are many possibilities in this state to address the affordability crisis. We have just had 2 years worth of legislative spending with ARPA money where we have addressed 3 of the major issues in front of the state. I'm happy to say that at least 2 of my opponents in the Democratic side haven't the foggiest idea that we've actually done that with that money. And they're approaching it from 2 years behind. But the bottom line is, for anybody serving in that office on the corner of the west wing of the building, it is a golden opportunity for you to coordinate the players who might be bringing good ideas for business into this state with the legislators who will be responsible for enacting legislation to make that happen.
Once again, Brooke Page, and the single most important issue for Secretary of State is to try to gain control over universal vote by mail. Universal vote by mail without universal vote by mail without voter ID, which Jimmy Condos has desperately pushed against, claiming it's racist, it's whatever, because somehow, and I think he's being racist by thinking that minority people and people of lower economic status can't get themselves together, can't get ID, can't get, the very modest things we ask them to have. A couple months worth of electric bills to prove who they are, And in addition to that, most of the towns, hopefully their checklists are somewhat up to date, but few towns have up-to-date signature cards. So all of these absentee ballots that are coming in, we have no idea who actually filled them out. It's just kind of, Russian roulette or Condos roulette, I guess. Beyond that, they're now letting vote harvesters basically go at will. They put this 25-person limit on vote harvesting, but the vote harvesters don't have to register. They don't have to keep documentation of what they're collecting. They can go down to Rockingham, turn in 25. They can go to Chester, turn in 25. Worse than that, the law doesn't say how many they can pick up, only how many they can turn in. So what if they're picking up a few extras and they realize the person they picked it up from probably isn't voting the way they'd like them to? You think those are going to make it down to the old town clerk's office? I suspect not. So I want to get in there, and the legislature has said we want universal vote by mail, which I think is not a good idea. But at least let's get it under control. Matter of fact, I'm in court right now attempting to force the state to not stop universal vote by mail because the legislature approved it, but to compel them to send out every ballot certified mail. So we have a signature, and we know that they were were handed to the voter rather than piles of them being dumped in the foyers of every dormitory and apartment building in the state. I'm mindful of my time, so if you have some more questions, we'll take this later. Next question, Rick.
Open it up. This is for you guys. Like that, Rick? Go ahead, Rick. Do you need a microphone, Randy? I hope not.
I would just like to say something real quick, if I might, on election integrity. In the House of Representatives, the For the People Act, H.R. 1, seeks to diminish the state control over the elections and place it in the hands of the federal government. Gerrymandering would become a way bigger problem, and it is all designed to favor the Democrats to make sure that we cannot have favorable numbers for Republicans anymore. I will vote against H.R. 1 when it comes back up, and they will bring it back up. I'm a states' rights person, and we have to keep elections in the control of the states. The federal government should never be controlling their own elections, period.
America, comment.
I am in agreement with that.
So, hope everybody.
Sorry.
Our national debt is $30 trillion. Our GDP is $23 trillion. And we have $4 trillion of tax revenue. And I've only heard one candidate up here so far, all the events I've been to, bring up the national debt. What do you guys plan to do about it? If you have a plan.
I mentioned I have mentioned the 30 trillion, and that is due to overspending by our government. Like I talked about, it's increasing M2, the money supply, recklessly, according to Senator Manchin, and to the tune of 1.9 trillion for ARPA, and increasing the national debt, I believe last year, by 2.5 trillion. So what I talked about just a minute or two ago was to get some discipline back in and spend within our budget. I don't think we need a tax increase, but we have to just, not overspend, because what's happening now, and it was mentioned before, we're late in the game. We missed it, and we missed the opportunity to tamp down the inflation. It's running away now, and we're at 9.1%, and it's been going up. We are in a recession, and unfortunately, every time they bump up that basis points, so we just did another 0.75. We're probably going to do a couple more of those. When that starts to get up into the fives, okay, we're paying hundreds of billions of dollars against ourselves in interest. So Democratic Party has us in a real jam, and it gets back to having the discipline. It gets back really to kind of overview of limited government, less spending, not more taxes, that I think all of us as Republicans would support. That's
On the issue of the debt, I think we ought to look at the legacy of Senator Leahy. When Senator Leahy came into office, the debt per person was about $2,500. Now when he's leaving office, the debt per person is over $95,000 per person. It's all. You actually, you're making the difference between the half of the people that actually pay the taxes and pay for the government and pay for everything to move forward. So on a per person basis, that's an incredible amount. And as Jerry mentions, as our interest rates tick up through this recession, right, the only way that they're going to be able to slow the economy down, right, is through a recession, right? And so they want the rates to be high, the Democrats. They want things, to move forward, to slow down. They want you to stop traveling. They want you to stop spending. That's a problem because prices are high and they have no way to get the underlying inflation down in the recession itself. The only good point, right, that they're pushing is this idea that employment is low. A lot of people have left the payroll, so their employment numbers are a little bit artificially low. But this could really change very quickly. But they're projecting, at least the Democrats, if you listen to MSNBC, they're kind of preparing the way under their administration for a 2 to 3 year recession, which is something we just can't afford on a day-to-day basis. And the debt is an issue most people don't bring up because it seems as if it doesn't exist, but it's very much a real problem in terms of the financing of the government. And I would not be in favor of tax increases. I don't think that's necessary at all. I want to see tax decreases. I want to see tax cuts. As much as the Democrats complain about the tax cuts that Trump accomplished, they move things forward. And I also object to this idea that, oh, if we cut taxes, as Bernie says, there's some rich man who will benefit, and that rich man is making you poor. No, Bernie Sanders is making you poor with his policies. It's not some rich man, and he's just picked up 3 homes for being a guy that was a carpenter. So he's done quite well. And if you look at the societies that they modeled themselves on, Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, all these communist countries replace, basically, like Russia has, these rich people like Bezos and Musk with other people like AOC and Bernie Sanders and the rest of the progressives. It's not that they want to get rid of the rich men, they want to become those rich men, right? It's not that they're going to take the money away from the rich man and give it to you. So I find that all very disassembling, and I remember from UVM, it was the same story. I don't know if you've ever been to Lunix down on Church Street, that same sort of, theoretical discussion about how great communism is, and it's not. But under their program, and now with Manchin coming back with this IRA program, that's where we're headed, and we've got to be strong. And as you've probably seen in this campaign, I'm willing to dig my feet in and to fight back against things that I think are wrong or dishonest, and I will fight back against the wrong and dishonest Democrats in Washington.
I love this question. As an accountant and a person who has spent the last 20 plus years helping small businesses and individuals make good financial decisions so they don't end up in the position of owing $30 trillion in debt, being in a position where the interest we pay on our debt is going to surpass other parts of our budget. This is a major, major problem. Not only just for us here, this is a national security problem. We have debt. We have countries that hate us holding our debt. If that's not a terrible decision, I literally do not know what is. So not only it was mentioned that we're going to be paying more in interest because the interest rates are spiking. Who has a mortgage? Mortgage rates have doubled. It's gone up. Benjamin and I are refinancing our house, and I think it's gone up like 1.5 points since we started the process a couple months ago. It's outrageous. So it is absolutely irresponsible, and it is unconscionable. Now, here's the thing. This is not something that we will deal with just at the federal level. Okay, we're going to deal with it at the federal level. We're going to push for a balanced budget. I'm sure any Republican on this stage would do that. Who here is familiar with Convention of States? Yes, my people, okay? You don't have to wait for the feds to fix it. We can fix it. The states can fix it. For those of you who don't know, go to conventionofstates.com, consider signing the petition. It is an opportunity to have an Article 5 convention where the states can call constitutional amendments. Convention of States wants a balance. I'm rephrasing. You're going to give me crap later for saying it wrong, but a balanced budget, restoring states' rights or reducing the size and scope of the federal government, and term limits for federal officials. Who else wants term limits for federal officials? Who else thinks Patrick Leahy should not have been there for 48 years? Outrageous, right? So when I say I want to restore integrity, transparency, and accountability, it's so people like Patrick Leahy and Peter Welsh can't be there for decades and decades, get entrenched, line their pockets, line their campaign coffers by giving away your money to their campaign donors and corporate interests.
To combat the federal deficit, we're going to have representatives who make very harsh and real decisions in Washington. And we're going to have to start cutting back on the overspending that has been a trademark of Democrat policies for the last 50 years. It is my goal to eventually sit on Budget and Appropriations Committee. One focuses on budget, the other one would be regulating government spending and oversight of government spending. And that is where the problem is lying. We have spent ourselves to this position, and it's going to take budgeting is a very simple task, really. You have a certain amount of money you can spend, this is what you can spend. It's not that complicated, okay? I've been budgeting since I was 12 years old. I know how this is done. And just because it's a larger figure doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same concept, that what you bring in needs to pay for what's going out. And that is what we need to do. That is absolutely what we need to do. And we can look at all of the, thank you, I appreciate that. We can look at all of the different reasons and all of the different ways that we spend money in Washington. But the bottom line is that there are a bunch of places that we can make cuts. And we're not going to be sacrificing services. There is wasteful spending. And to cut that is going to help us with our federal debt. That it's that simple. It sounds too simple to be true, but it's that simple. We have to cut the wasteful spending. We have to stop the runoff of money from the federal government into programs that have nothing to do with helping the American people. Nothing to do with it. And we'll talk about wasteful spending for a second. The Green New Deal gives us a negligible amount of actual environmental help. Over the next 30 years is estimated to cost between $7 and $94 trillion. 30 years for the taxpayers. That's going to be my working life. That's going to be most people's working life that are my age or younger, and definitely anybody older than me the rest of their career. If you can't tell me between 7 and 94 what this is going to cost, you clearly don't know what you're doing. And we should not be enacting bills that clearly have not been researched properly. These are the ways that we cut government debt.
Those of us who are Vermonters and those of us who want to be Vermonters clearly understand the largest employer in the state of Vermont is the state of Vermont. Unfortunately, a lot of people go out of the state of Vermont and go elsewhere. Businesses go elsewhere because they cannot afford to stay in the state of Vermont. One of the bigger businesses just south of here, CNS Wholesale Grocers, moved their stuff to Keene, New Hampshire because it was much more tax friendly. This is an open question to all of you candidates, on the state level and the federal level. What can we do to make Vermont more business friendly? Because right now, we are not. We are alienating businesses from the state of Vermont. That coupled with the fact that the biggest employer in the state of Vermont is the state of Vermont, that needs to go away also too. But it's such an entrenched bureaucracy, it's going to require a yeoman's effort to make it happen. Huge question, probably going to have a huge answer to it. So, have at it.
I've got the microphone, so I'm going to take first shot here. A little out of my wheelhouse as Secretary of State, but I would point out that Vermont has per capita the highest ratio of state employees, local employees, school district employees to the population of any country or any state in the Union. The thing I find most interesting is when most of the state employees or many of the state employees retire, they get out of town. They go to Florida, they go to Tennessee, they go to North Carolina, where the tax burden isn't so bad. So now the folks they left behind are now burdened with continuing to throw cash in the kitty to pay for their retirement, while they don't have to pay Vermont income tax anymore to subsidize their own retirement. I think it's insane. One other little thing I wanted to mention about elections. I'm not certain that we have election fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the election, okay, which is the legal term that they always look for. What my concern is the appearance of impropriety. There are so many people that I talk to out there who have given up, who don't even vote anymore because they think the whole thing's rigged. And they think the whole thing's rigged because they see ballots being papered all over the place. They see all sorts of mischief and hanky-panky going on. And Jim Condo's sitting there going, oh, there's no election fraud. And then under his breath, he goes, but I don't have the authority to investigate it or to do anything about it. And so he doesn't even look for it. Well, Jim Condos may have gold bars out under the dooryard out back, but he doesn't know he's a millionaire yet because he never bothered to look for it. And it's the same thing with voter fraud. It's easy to say you don't have any if you don't look for any.
I got a 3-word answer for you. Elect more Republicans. Now, permit me to expand a little bit. There is a reason why Phil Scott is now the #1 veto governor in the state of Vermont. No, that's a serious statement. He is. It's absolutely true. And the reason is because he has been hit constantly with attempts to grow the government. And that's because we don't have enough Republicans in the legislature. In a 30-member Senate, there are 7 Republicans. In a 150-member House, there are 47 Republicans. The simple answer to the question is to elect people who are not going to grow your government. But presently, the legislature is dominated by people who are responding to every lobbyist in the building. If you've taken a look at the lobbyist list that is provided to us by the Secretary of State, you will notice 6 pages, single-spaced, of about 300 lobbying organizations. Every single possible liberal cause is represented by the bulk of those individuals. And it's problematic for those of us who are Republicans running for office when we try to get money for the positions we're in. Because one of the places you get that money is that list of lobbyists. But conservative lobbyists don't exist on that list to the extent that we can compete. Now, I can't speak for Greg because I don't know what his finances are. In my case, I've probably raised about $25,000 right now. Kitty Toll, over $200,000. David Zuckerman, over $200,000. Patricia Preston, over $100,000. Charlie Kimball was the lowest. He's probably outraised me 20 to 1. So it's not flippant. I'm not trying to be flippant at all. In fact, I'm trying to say desperately, we've got to force ourselves to working harder to elect more Republicans.
Joe beat me to it. I was going to mention Republicans also, but he's exactly right. And I think on the national level, looking at the Republican Party, we're about less regulation, less control, and that's what's driving up the cost. I would say at the local level, I think it's Act 250 is an example, making it very, very hard, very costly, very time-consuming to build new houses here, for instance. So it is about the state wanting to be competitive to attract industry, and if, for instance, the Democrats are not interested in that, we're going to be stuck in the exact same position.
I would say, I would take it a step further from these gentlemen, and you've got to elect more conservative Republicans. It's not just being a Republican. I echo Nancy. But to that end, Dale, great question. Thank you, and thank you for all your work. I would talk about cutting taxes, cutting regulation. Vermont is not seen as a business-friendly state. For the folks who live here, trying to retain people, and folks that are looking outside of the state to come into Vermont and invest. COVID's over. You know, the lockdowns are over. That stuff's gone. So now it's about we the people, and we need to all be marketing Vermont. When I was on the city council in Rutland City, I had a Market Rutland initiative, and we did some good things. A lot of the things we heard over in New York and in New Hampshire, your tax structure, your regulations, your broadband. Those are things that these people in Montpelier today are not taken care of for you. So that would be my position. But yes, we have to elect more conservative Republicans. Thank you. Great question, Dale.
If I can just address that question, this issue is exactly in my wheelhouse. So there are really two levels to it. One is the business environment, and the other is recruiting companies. So in the 90s and in the early 2000s, the deals that you heard about where Morgan Stanley negotiated between Connecticut and New York, that was what I worked on. When you heard about General Electric retaining Kidder Peabody and NBC at 30 Rock, as opposed to going to Connecticut, or when you heard about Smith Barney looking at New York versus Texas, those economic incentive deals were deals that I worked on. In fact, were what I devoted my time to at Morgan Stanley. And more than relationships for businesses, it's all economics, right? It's where can they find the cheapest place for labor, for locations, for taxes. And as Greg points out, our taxes are very high here. But what we've been unwilling to do is to ring fence some of these companies, right, and go after them. One of the things that is part of my platform is, say, going after Tesla, right? What can we do to bring Tesla here or other green jobs, right? And the idea would be that obviously we can't, the state legislature probably will not be receptive to this idea, but as a federal officer, I can bring additional federal monies to bear to bring these companies here to level the playing field. We can't level all of Vermont to be the same as New Hampshire. New Hampshire's killing us in terms of business recruitment, right? But we need to be able to establish a number of important factories or important job centers here to move forward. One of the things that I push for that our federal representatives are not looking at right now is the $72 billion CHIPS Act. And I've been talking about this since Christmas, right? That we deserve to have a $2 to $8 billion slice of that $72 billion. It would be a huge win for Vermont. Albany, so these are basically microchip fabrication plants that are being sponsored by the federal government because China makes all our microchips and it's a national security issue. So we need to produce our own microchips. Okay, fine. We have the ability to do that both in the north and the south of Vermont, but we haven't capitalized on it. Schumer has made sure that they're getting $8 to $12 billion in Albany. That's about 40 miles from our border. There's absolutely no reason we shouldn't have a federal microchip fabrication facility here. But you know, it's the icon of Vermont, Bernie Sanders, who says, someone will get rich. There's a rich man getting rich from this investment. Well, what about us? We're all getting poor while some mythical man is getting rich. Bring the investment to Vermont, right? Another thing that's happening is the work from home. Now that really has hit the southern counties, and it hits this broadband issue. So I was able to really move back, pandemic-wise, because I could do work from home and control whatever I was working on from Manchester. And there are literally thousands of people that would move here if we could just allow them to work from home. But we have horrible broadband. So the $550 million that came out of ARPA was decided that they would spend on digging a ditch to every person's home to install fiber, right? That's a 10-year process, and already the unelected person they put in charge is saying it's now $1 billion. But if we had broadband, we could get people to come here and reduce our tax base. What I've said is take the $550 million and let's make a deal with Elon Musk right now, right? Would Governor Scott pick up the phone and call Elon Musk? Probably not, obviously, because I gave him the idea and done anything with it. But if you call Elon Musk and offer him $550 million for 240,000 households, he'd do it. And we would have 3 years of free service. Now, when I say free broadband, I sound like a communist, because when I said that online, everyone's, oh, free broadband, what is he talking about? Right, that's horrible. Well, no, it's not horrible. It's just Yankee spending. Why are we wasting money in ditches when we should be having service? So I'm saying, why would you want a free ditch when you could have free service? Starlink is much better. It's 50% faster through space than it is through fiber, which is a backwards-looking technology. And that's another issue of spending that, and then affordable housing, we're spending 3 times as much. I think we need greater focus. We need to have outsiders that are not in business, that are not lobbyists, that are not part of DOJ. I'm an outsider. I've never been elected before. We need outside business people pushing these things forward in order to make them happen. On the business side, it just won't happen. And my goal is to produce these higher paying jobs. We get higher paying jobs. They have ripple effects all across the economy. You have all people servicing the higher paying jobs. And then you have an economy that can sustain your children and grandchildren. Right now, we're just getting to be an aging population where a lot of us aren't going to be able to work. And there's no opportunity here, and there aren't really healthcare and other senior services to take care of it. We need a stronger economy to support where we are as a state. So bringing businesses would be my number one task. I've moved 300,000 jobs. That's half the state, right? But it's not a relation, it's not this idea that, hey, buddy, hey, Joe, we were out drinking last night. Why don't you bring company up to Vermont, right? It's not that way. All these CEOs are under tremendous pressure and review from stakeholders and shareholders. You've got to prove to them, right, financially that it makes sense and that you've got the workforce. Some of that will require subsidies, and I would make sure that we could bring that from the federal government in that case.
Keith has an answer to the question.
Yeah, I just want to has everyone had a chance to respond to that particular question? Okay, just a moment. The next question will be this gentleman right here. We're going to give him the microphone so he can. Did you realize, I didn't realize it until someone just told me that this is actually being live streamed. So, and this is going to be, something that can be sent around later. So, Brooke, why don't you go ahead and make your comment, and then we'll have this gentleman ask the question.
Yeah.
And the only thing that is going to fix it is getting conservatives elected. Period. I have to repeat what Joe Benning said. People, if you don't understand this, it doesn't matter what else you care about. It doesn't matter if you're out trying to educate people on the Second Amendment. It doesn't matter if you're fighting for pro-life. We're all sitting there screaming at the wind to a bunch of people who do not care about your values, they do not respect what you believe, and they don't want the same thing as you. So stop trying to lobby the state government and get on the ground, vote for candidates who are at least moderate and reasonable, right? This is, I just want to say this really quick, and then Keith, I want you to get to ask your question. So, conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, like anybody who is right of center, okay? We have a wide range of beliefs. And what I've been hearing over and over again as I cross the state is, well, that person doesn't agree with me on this one thing, so I'm not going to vote.
Couple of things.
Do you know how irresponsible and ridiculous that is? And so, really, in all sincerity, Republicans only have themselves to blame. I've been lied about by people who used to be supporters of mine, saying stuff that is not true. Thereby, if I win the primary, it's damaging me. Plus, by the way, what's your other option? Let Becca Ballant get elected? So you disagree with me on one or two issues, and so you're just not going to vote, and you're not going to spread the word, and you're not going to campaign for me. That is literally shooting yourself in the foot. And I've heard it over and over and over again since 2019 when I started getting involved in politics here. Republicans do not participate. 40%. The average is 40% in any given year. People do not vote for our races. Congress, Senate. people don't vote of the registered voters. Whose fault is that? Everyone that I talk to that says they don't vote would vote for us. But they don't, because our people aren't out there spreading the word. They're running around being mad because they don't like the Republican Party, or somebody hurt their feelings, or they don't act right. Well, guess what? Too bad. Suck it up. Everybody has to just suck it up. And we have to learn to get along whether we like each other or not, because we're at war. And if that is not clear, your feelings do not matter when we are at war. We are fighting for our Constitution. We are fighting for our freedom. So everyone needs to just suck it up. Share the message.
Three quick thoughts. I'm sorry. One, Joe Benning mentioned about lobbyists, the 200 plus lobbyists. The most important problem with the 200 lobbyists are they're the ones that write our laws. Trust me, the folks that are, what's legal counsel up over there in the legislature? Legislative counsel, they just sit around waiting for the paperwork to come in from the lobbyists. The lobbyists are writing the laws, and legal counsel is just kind of handing it out, and the folks we're putting in office are just kind of, saying, "Ooh, this looks pretty good." Second thought I had was, you wanted the best proof that what we're doing in Vermont isn't such a great idea? Go on Google Maps and take a look at the Connecticut River Valley, okay? You have every single town, as you go along, West Leb versus White River Junction, St. Johnsbury versus, Littleton, thank you. Windsor versus Claremont, all the way down the river. All you gotta do is take a look at the map. It's all nice and green on the Vermont side. No, not a business in sight. And it's all big stores and parking lots on the other side of the Connecticut River. Third thought, and I wasn't going to say this at first, but everybody's talking about Republicans not being so motivated. Motivation starts at the head, okay? And unfortunately for the Vermonters right now, our governor, who isn't here today, as a matter of fact, he's the only only statewide candidate that isn't, our governor is as worried about getting the Democratic vote, if not more so, than binding his own party together and getting a party win for the Republicans. And that's a sad state of affairs, Anyway, I'm going to leave it there before I get in so much trouble they haul me out.
Okay, we went from a tremendous president that had economy booming to a clown show now. And any of you, if you didn't vote for Donald Trump, tell us who you voted for and explain your mindset to go for this.
I'll go first.
Let's go down the line.
Thank you. I'd like to actually go first because, first of all, I'm going to say I did vote for Donald Trump, and I will vote for him again. End of subject there. To your question, really quick, I will say that my role in Washington is going to be a champion for the state. And while the state legislator and the governor have more control over the business climate in the state, I would like to partner with them in recruiting. I have a background in business and marketing, so I know what businesses are looking for and how to market things to them. So that is what I would do. Really quickly, the NRA spent over 140 years in the state of New York. It was their home since the very beginning. They picked up and they moved to Texas. And the reason for that is because Texas offered them what they needed. There are all kinds of reasons that companies move around. Most of them are financial, but some of them are just supporting what they stand for. So I would like to target businesses that like a rural lifestyle, that value that, things that Vermont values, and bring them to. And I'll move down the line.
I voted for Trump.
I voted for Trump proudly and will again if he's our nominee. And I was also present on January 6th in Washington, D.C. And I'm very proud of being there. It was a great day leading up to what happened. And I condemn what happened inside that building, our building, the People's House. But I did step off the curve. And I did head towards the Capitol, carrying a Trump flag and an American flag. So, thank you.
Right. As you know, Keith, I did not vote for Donald Trump. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I would very much like to know who's been spreading the lie that I voted for Biden. Please tell me who that source is. I would like to know. Because as Richard Lee knows, at the Rutland debate, I pointed out to him my wife on the other side of the room, and I said, that's who I voted for, because I was not appreciative of the personality of Donald Trump. And I'm somewhat angry that people are going out there to talk about me blatantly lying when they know the truth. That's hard to take as a Republican. I acknowledge Donald Trump did several things that were very good. My psyche has never allowed me to say I can vote for a man who has done what he has done by way of his personality. That has been problematic, and it remains so for me. But I don't want anybody to leave this room thinking I'm somehow out there beating the band for Joe Biden. And one other point about that same string. I learned today that some of the very same people who are telling people about me voting for Joe Biden are claiming that I endorsed Becca Balint. Erica, what is your response to that statement?
I just started laughing. I think that's hysterical.
I don't know who the moron is, frankly, that's sending that kind of crap out, but that's how we Republicans don't get elected, because we're pointing at each other in the circular firing squad. And when we go knocking on doors, this is really problematic. We are running into people who are saying, I'm not going to vote for you. You guys are clowns. And that's problematic.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Joe, how are you?
Richard, I'm just fine, thank you.
First of all, you blocked me on Twitter.
And you
You're
know
not-
why?
Why, Joe?
Because you dominated my feed.
That's why I'm
You
here
are
to
dominating every
raise you
person
up for
on
the
that
people.
feed.
But-
35, 40 comments,
You know,
not allowing anybody else to
okay,
participate.
so let me
That's
make-
why you got
Let's talk
blocked.
about Becca Balint. I read Twitter all the time. You can't compliment her enough on Twitter. They couldn't come back enough.
What?
Wait a minute, let me finish. They couldn't.
We don't want to have a.
No, I'm not. But
acrimonious
this is,
thing.
he's accused me of something here, and I'm going to address
Well, you can
it.
settle that separately, but
Well,
right now we're having a debate with
okay.
all the candidates.
All right, so-
I'd like to have the microphone, please. You'll have a chance to speak to people individually. All right. This is an opportunity. Anna, do you have a question you want to ask?
Oh, wait a second. We had a couple more. Rick?
I'm sorry, I don't know who was supposed to be next.
Wait.
All right, I'll relinquish the microphone.
The question was, who did we vote for? If I remember correctly, getting back on track here. And I will tell you that in 2016, I took a careful look, and I saw the incarnate of the devil, Hillary Rotten Clinton, was on the ballot against Donald Trump. And I was not a big excited person about Donald Trump, okay? Matter of fact, I had previously written an editorial comparing Donald Trump to Peter Shumlin because they had so many things in common. They both seemed to run around on their wives a little bit. They both took full credit for the companies that their parents started, okay? And so I wasn't thrilled, but compared to the incarnate devil, Mr. Trump seemed like a better choice. 2020 came around. And remember, I was working from a better level of information than you folks were. I remembered little Joey taking on Caleb Boggs. So I had followed little Joey very carefully for 40 plus years, okay? And believe it or not, even though I was on the ballot in Vermont for president, along with my cousin Tom from Georgia as vice president, my wife and I both voted for Donald Trump. Okay? And I think that we really need to keep on balance, that people have personal lives, that we're not looking for patron saints here. We're looking for people who are going to look out for our best interest. And when we get to 2022, you should be looking for people who have your best interest at heart, not have all these nuanced little troubles and backbiting and carrying on where people, it's just awful. We have to look at the big picture. We have to all be Republicans, and we have to realize that we've got to start bailing the water out of the boat or we're going under.
Amen. I voted for Trump.
No, the reason I'm jumping in here is because we advertised this event to go from 4 to 7, right? And we expected that the question and answers would be going till 6:30. That's now. And then after that, we would have a chance to individually, not so much up on the platform in a big setting like this, continue to speak to people one-to-one. And one of the issues I have to be concerned about here is that some of the folks here actually need to get on to another event somewhere else.
Well, they're welcome to do so.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
My only concern is that the folks come in and talk to the Lord.
Right. We're not stopping right now, but we're thinking.
Not everyone wants to get up in public and ask their questions
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
We hear from Jim.
So what I'm saying is that we'd probably go one more round, and then we'd pretty much put aside the formal side of this event, and then you can have more informal discussions after that.
But these folks that are willing to raise their hand and ask, I think they should get an opportunity.
All right. So, all right, Michelle.
Everybody talks about all the issues, and I think we can all agree that everybody's on the same page. We have economy issues, we have health issues, we have all sorts of issues. Now, you all talk about defending the Constitution, right? How many people in this room, human beings, know that the criminals usurped the 13th Amendment? There's a missing 13th Amendment that talks about slavery, but there is no mention whatsoever. I asked Joe Benning this question. I've asked several others. Does anybody know that there's a missing 13th Amendment?
I know.
Okay, so what that means is the criminals, and no offense to any lawyers in this room, the lawyers are not supposed to sit in any political seats. So those lawyers, along with the lobbyists, have been making the rules for us. Okay? So how many are you aware that there's a missing 13th Amendment? Yes. Other than Joe Benning, because I asked. Okay. That needs to be looked up because that's one of the crux of what's wrong with this country. We don't even know that there's a missing 13th Amendment. They threw it in the dustbin because it says no lawyers can sit in a public office. Because it's under the nobility law of Britain, wherever it came in. So I would like whoever is going to get into office to find out where the 13th missing amendment is so we can move forward in this country, because a lot of that is why we have issues in this country. Because we have criminals in place making the rules, policies, and procedures for all of us. Okay?
If I could take something tangential to that, there's a lot of talk about the convention of states and all of that, and people are very, very supportive of all that. And I guess Mark Levin is a big backer of all of that. And my concern is, and when I've looked into it, it's like a crapshoot. It's like you're willing to take the entire Constitution and potentially throw it to the wind. It's my understanding. Well, and if I'm wrong, then fine. But
Look it up. Look it up. That's all.
okay, I've read on it before, and
Because we have a bunch of criminals running this country.
well, I'm not sure I'd debate with you on that. But in any case,
Okay, next question. Anna, I'm bringing it to you, Anna. Anna's next.
Thank you. One issue that hasn't been much addressed this afternoon is education, both at the federal level and in our state. And of course, we've in Vermont seen a dreadful process of the state taking control of financing of education, and then the attempt to centralize it, to consolidate school districts. And now, if I understand correctly, to remove as much of school choice that exists. So I wondered if both at the federal level, and I think we should abolish the Federal Department of Education. Oh, good one. But this attack on school choice, I'm in favor of having the money follow the child, let families work it out. But how would you concretely address that? What might you do to make it more possible? Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to go first on this question because we have an event in Burlington tonight, so we got a nice long drive back home. So I'm also for abolishing the Department of Education federally. There are a number of departments like that are, number one, redundant, but number two, harmful. Everyone that I know that is an educator will tell you that the No Child Left Behind Act left every child behind. I can tell you that in Burlington, even though we're spending $20,000 a pupil, we're only graduating 75% of our students, and most of them are not at reading proficiency for high school. My sister taught science at Winooski and had to teach at a middle school level to high school kids. So our educational system is broken. And who in here has kids, has had kids go through the school system, whatever, if you've ever had kids? What could you do for your child's education with $20,000 a year? I love all the ideas. I am in agreement with all of them. If we are going to appropriate money, if we are going to decide as a society, as a culture, that we value education and we want to pay for it because we recognize that there is a value in an educated public, I know I do. I think it's okay. I'm okay with some taxes, right? I'm okay with making sure people can read. I think that's a priority. That seems like a public good worth spending money on. However, that's not all we're spending the money on. They're spending it on nonsense. In Burlington, they want to build a new $250 million school that no one can afford. They say everyone in Burlington is in poverty, and that's why we need to do all this stuff, and then they want to raise taxes. And then they're confused about why it's expensive to live there. It's very obvious. We just need to make better decisions. I strongly support every dollar should follow the child so that parents who are in the best position to decide what those children need to be educated, it should be in their hands with their decision and their guidance, not the government's. And with that, I am going to step outside. So if anybody has a question, maybe they don't want to stand up in front of everybody, please feel free to meet me outside there in the little foyer area. We're going to hang out for a couple minutes. We have copies of our book, Reasons to Trust the Government. Everyone who knows me should know that it's satirical. Okay? Just to make sure we're clear. Yeah, it's $9.99 on Amazon.com. And go to reddickforcongress.com. You can ask questions there as well. Check out more about the campaign, donate, do all of the fun stuff. I will directly ask you for money. I need your money. If I'm running against Becca Ballant, she has $1 million in the bank already. We need you guys. No matter who wins, we need you. Okay, that's and my pitch. Thank you guys. Thank you.
On education.
I will say this about the education. Money should follow the child. Vermont has one of the highest costs of education, and we're not getting anything for it. I have people that I know, high school students, that thought that Abraham Lincoln and George Washington both fought in the Civil War. That is a true story, okay? We are not getting what we need. But I'm going to talk about a different direction on education. If they spent less time trying to propagandize and indoctrinate your children, they'd have more time to learn the real stuff, okay? And yes, in Orleans County, it's a huge problem with CRT. It is around the state. Parents may or may not believe that it's happening, but it is happening. And oftentimes it's because the children don't know what this is to tell their parents it's happening. And the teachers and the supervisory unions tell them, oh, it absolutely is not. That is not true. Every book, every piece of educational material they give them is skewed to a political agenda. And we need to go back to teaching the basics of mathematics, history, geography. Maybe knowing where a country is in the world would help people out a little bit. We need the basics of education, and that shouldn't cost us what it's costing. I'm a big proponent of school choice, homeschool, charter school. Parents need to have the right to determine their own children's educational course. Parental rights matter. Thank you.
I think there's some confusion here. The Agency of Education is not here to educate your children. It's to provide full employment for the teachers' unions and supervisories union. The children are just a tangential product that happens to be pushed through the system. Give them lots of grades, get them out the door. Don't worry that they're totally unprepared for college. Yeah, absolutely. School choice for the parents. Let the money follow the parents, and if the schools are good, the parents will send the money right back to the schools. If they're not, maybe not.
This is really a state issue, but there's a federal component which I've been focused on. One, both the university level and then at the elementary and secondary level. At the university level, I don't know if you know, our flagship university, UVM, educates only 18% Vermonters. That's 82% of everyone who goes to that college is from, they all vote, and they're not voting for you, and they're not voting for me, right? 82% are all out-of-staters. So if you read the charter of the school, and I should have hired Joe to sue him in court, and maybe that'll come, right? The charter of the school is that they have to educate Vermonters, and they're in violation of the charter. So my argument is we should take them to court, and if they choose, if they fail to educate Vermonters, or at least 50% Vermonters, they should pay a tax. They're sitting on 1,000 acres of the best land in all of Vermont, rent-free. I think the entire enterprise of UVM is probably worth $15 to $17 billion. It's not out of the ordinary for them to pay less than 1% in a $150 million tax, 60 of it to Chittenden, and $5 million to every other county. And I would very much push that on the federal level. Well, how could I make that happen? Well, UVM is getting $226 million from the federal government, and I would immediately cut that off. How could I do it? I'd do it any way I could, right? And then when, you know, the teachers and the professors and the faculty aren't getting their grants, then all of a sudden I imagine UVM would come to the table. And that's the same thing at the state level. The state gets money back from the federal government on education, right? When we want our dollars to follow the children, when we want to have those dollars allow our children to be homeschooled and go to religious schools and have the values that we want to transmit to them, then I'll get a hold of that federal money. I'm sure it'll make people mad, right? Because it's the teachers union that we're fighting against. The teachers that we thought were our friends. The teachers that we thought were taking care of our children, right? But that teachers union is pretty strong. We saw how they behaved during COVID. Everybody wanted to go back to school except for the teachers. So, and look what it's done to our children. So I would very much take a very strong role at the federal level in trying to cut off funding in the state until we got education where we needed it to be.
If I could just say one or two things. A couple of observations. So my daughter, I mentioned, is her birthday. She's taken time off from UVM, and she's actually taking courses through CCV. And I think there's kind of a sea change coming on here with education, because she is much more enjoying and getting more out of the much less expensive CCV classes than she was at UVM, sitting in a room and testing and all that kind of stuff. I agree, it is more at a local level, and it takes getting involved in school boards and things. One thing I would say is there in education, particularly in cities, there's just too many layers, and there's too many administrator where you're paying for all that, and then you have the teacher. I'm using school choice right now. We've been pleased with it. I will say it will be a big step backwards for Vermont if they decide to take that away.
I was educated in Catholic school and a couple years in public. My children, Catholic education, so I didn't have to deal with those issues, if you will. My grandmother, my father, my grandmother was an educator in Catholic education in Rutland. My dad and my uncles were educated in Catholic school. So when I first got on the city council, people would say, "Oh, you got to send your kids to public school now." I said, "No, I don't. I mean, my kids have always gone, as I did, and my dad and my grandmother, to Catholic school. It's just another way of life to us, you know." And both my parents' grocery stores were near the Catholic schools, Christ the King and MSJ. Back 25 years ago, I was part of a team, Jeff Winberg, our former mayor, and Libby Sternberg, a school choice advocate, and myself, and before I was on the city council, we did a non-binding referendum on school choice. It won 2-1 in the city, but in the poorest district in the city, the Southwest District, it won 2.5-1. People want a choice for their children. Back then, again, 25 years ago, they were recognizing that there are problems in our school. Test scores were already low, and education costs back then was probably like $9,000. Today, it's nearly $20,000 to educate a child. So those are issues, and I'm a firm proponent of school choice, as well as charter schools, but we'll never have charter schools with the current makeup, of the legislature. And I see where the legislature is starting to come after some of these school choice court hearings, court findings. And so there's going to be some issues. It's going to be a fight. That's why it's so important to elect conservatives, so we can take care of that. There was one other thing I wanted to mention before I think Joe speaks.
I was just going to say, the Democrats are aligned with the unions, teachers' unions. That's part of the problem.
Exactly. So I'm going to leave it there, but thank you very much.
So I guess I'm going to classify myself as being pretty lucky. I went through 12 years of Catholic schooling. My parents were not rich. Came real close to many days when we had very little to eat in order to afford the tuition to go through that process. In fact, I learned how to love scrambled eggs and graham crackers mixed together, which was a common staple. My parents raised me to understand and believe in the best education possible. And that's one of the reasons I look at Republicans as having one of their core values as being an education system that can enable our children to participate in a global marketplace. I think I'm also the only person up here that is actually married to a school teacher who teaches in a public school where I was once a school director. I also served on the education committee in the legislature. The point of all that is I'm deeply invested and deeply experienced with our educational system. Now, Gerald, I'm very disappointed that you didn't announce where your child is going in the Northeast Kingdom.
St. Johnsbury Academy.
I'm from the Northeast Kingdom. I started by saying I feel very lucky because we have the Academy, we have Linden Institute, we have the Thaddeus Stevens School, we have Riverside. And Jerry, just so you know, Riverside is where your famous ending line of May the 14th Star Shine Bright became the state's Latin motto, with Stella Corta Decima Fulgiat being that language. And in case you don't know, Latin has nothing to do with Spanish or Mexico. It's a Roman language. I want to make an observation and push back a little bit on behalf of my wife's public school. It's a 3-story building with approximately 450 children inside. I've spent a lot of time in that building, and I don't know how many of you have actually spent any time in the past 5 years, let's say, inside of a classroom. About 3 weeks ago, I was asked to go in and give a presentation to 6th graders. I started on the ground floor in my wife's classroom waiting for the 6th grade to say I was ready. At 8 o'clock, the bell rang. I miscalculated the time. This was the Friday before Memorial Day. At 8 o'clock, the bell rang. Every student on all 3 floors stood immediately and put their hands over their hearts and recited in unison the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know what's going on around the rest of the state, but I know in my county, I'm very proud of the schools, both the private schools, the independent schools, and the public schools, because the parents are deeply invested in all of those. And that is something I do believe every single Republican believes in. And the only way we're going to bring about change is by electing more Republicans.
Mike, I believe I saw that you were trying to ask a question. I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, sorry. I missed.
Mike, you're first after him.
Ladies and gentlemen, a while ago you made a comment about New Hampshire and their tax structure and what have you. There's just one big difference between New Hampshire and Vermont. They don't have a personal income tax. And they have figured out how to finance their state through business taxes and other types of funding.
Business and property taxes.
Right. And for passing thought, Rebecca Ballant is a native of New Jersey.
Thank you. The surprise. I know some fine people from New Jersey, so I won't criticize the state for being. Yeah. Yes. I will speak to this. Becca Ballant has $900,000 worth of spending, mostly from super PACs that have come into her race. $900,000. And she's by far outspent any candidate in the congressional race thus far. It's a very good likelihood that she's actually going to win in the general election, which comes as a bit of a surprise to me. I thought that it was going to be Molly Gray. In the primary, yes, I'm sorry. No, she won't win the general if we have anything to do with it. I strongly believe that. But she is trying to win the primary by outspending everybody else, and she's spent there's about $900,000 worth of spending. Bernie Sanders supports her. That should be all we need to know, that we don't want this woman in Washington. And the other one, I believe, is Equality PAC that promotes LGBTQ candidates, regardless of where they stand on any issue. It is only about LGBTQ. And I will say that what they do in their private life, what anybody does in their private life, has nothing to do whether they will serve you in Congress correctly. So that PAC focuses only on their sexual orientation and not on the issues. It's a very sad situation. Okay, Mike. Oh, did other people want to speak to his question?
Take the mic. Mike, take the mic. This microphone. Okay, I wanted to share a story and maybe get a response related to what we were just talking about, education. So my kids go to a private school, independent Waldorf school, 3 sons. But we still do some of the events at the local Twinfield Union, which covers Plainfield and Marshfield, I believe. So anyway, so I would walk down the hallway during their after-school events, which they would still attend at Twinfield,
And I know not all the schools are like this. It was nice to hear stories about the Northeast Kingdom like that, but I felt like I was walking down a campaign hall for the Democrat Party. And what I mean by that is the walls were plastered with BLM, with signs encouraging students to vote or ask their parents to vote against, any legislation that went against LGBT in sports or anything like that. It was all like the Democratic platform on the walls in the school, in the public school, mind you. And I actually confronted the school board about it because they're my school board. I live in their towns and I pay taxes to them. And I think their argument was, well, the students put it all up, so that makes it okay. And I don't know if that's really true or not, but that was their answer to me. But I guess my answer, or my question to all of you is, how do we turn this tide where the public schools in particular, maybe not everywhere, but in much of the state and the nation, for those of you going to the Capitol, how do we get this around, turn around the curriculum? I mean, the curriculum, the messaging. I'm not saying students shouldn't be allowed to advocate for things they believe in, but it looks like very one-sided right now.
Elect more Republicans.
How about this? How about elect Ricky down here and people who think like her around the state? Because that stuff, ooh. She's on the other side? Oh. Well, welcome. Anyways, we need to get conservatives in the school boards. 20 years ago, I used to talk about that when I was Republican chair in Rutland, and it was that we can't just look at the legislature and we can't just look at town councils. We have to look at the school boards, and then we have to hold accountable these unelected people. And that's what we're not doing. And so that's why it takes all of us to rise up and to stand up against this stuff. So I'm just going to leave it there, but thank you. I too have an event back up in the Rutland area in Brandon at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to step outside if anybody wants to chat. If not, that's fine. Thank you all very much for coming. Remember my website, www.thayerforvermont.org. Thank you all for coming. God bless you, and get out and vote and bring some friends, and remember the Greg Thayer 10 call plan. Thanks.
To address Mike's question, it's not so much a problem with the children putting up these little posters if they were motivated themselves. The real problem is that the teachers are the political advocates, and they're all advocating on one side. The teachers should be teaching the basics, real history, not made up history, real mathematics, real science, not pretend science, and the rest of it should be left for the parents' guidance. The teacher shouldn't be in there advocating for Bernie Sanders or for whoever. And because our children, especially when they're in elementary school, are highly impressionable. They see the teacher as being the equivalent of their parent. And this is the problem. We're paying these people to indoctrinate our children. They're teaching them the things that should be left to the venue, the purview of the parents to teach. And they should be restricted to teaching the 3 R's, 4 R's, however many R's we have these days. And that's it. And that's the problem, that we have political advocates in our classrooms.
Can I go in?
We're getting close to the ending time, but we're not over if you want to stick around. But I want to address this question. It's been brought up a couple times. The asymmetrical fight that we have between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of finances. It's been mentioned, $900,000 for Becca Balint and money like that.
$3.5 million for Welch.
So, all right, that's the reality. What are we going to do about it in your race? And are you still nonetheless hopeful?
I'm very hopeful. I do have a PAC that is, I'm not supposed to talk about, I guess, but I have a PAC, and I've lined up what I think is great support for this next step. I have been reaching deep into my own pockets to get through this first primary, but I'm excited about the next step in the general election next 3 months.
Thank you. I am hopeful about it, and I think that it's really going to come down to the voters, to the grassroots efforts, and talking about the issues that people care about, the affordability, the fact that their children's education matters to them, just filling your vehicle with gas, defending your constitutional rights, your freedom of speech, your right to own and carry firearms. All of these things are things that people care about, and it's going to take talking to each individual person about what they care about. Okay? Not everybody cares about every issue, but what they care about is what they can vote for. And the Republican Party offers the answers to each of these problems. This state, Vermont, has had single party leadership in Washington, D.C. for decades, and nobody is better off for it. And we need to talk about that. We need to talk about the fact that when it's failed repeatedly, it's time to move on. It's time to get to a new place, elect new people with new ideas so that they can combat the stagnation and the degrading and the decline that has happened in our state. So that's why I'm hopeful. I believe that grassroots is very powerful, very strong. I'm talking to some people from Virginia that worked on Youngkin's campaign, and I'm hoping that they're going to be able to do some good work here in Vermont. I'm looking forward to that. Fundraising is always an issue, and particularly this year, because people don't have money. They don't have that extra money. And I mean, the ones that do, they help out where they can. I've had some very generous donations, and I'm very appreciative for all of them. But it's going to come down to the voters. We are not going to raise $900,000 for a conservative candidate or even any Republican candidate in this state. It's just not going to happen this election. So that's why we have to go and rely on we the people. And I believe the people's voice will be heard. And I think that it's time that we turn Vermont back around to affordable and the state that we want to live in. So that's my goal, and I appreciate the question.
So Rick, you and I have had several conversations about how we as Republicans have to run against that machine that is very well financed. I want to point out a couple of things. First, when I first got elected, I unseated a sitting Democrat who was better financed than I was. And I did that because I recognized right off that I was not entitled to the seat. I had to earn it. I had to be out on the street. I had to be waving at cars at morning drive and afternoon drive. I had to be visiting coffee klatches. I had to be visiting storefronts. I had to be knocking on doors. That's the responsibility of the candidates. In my race with the Democrats just yesterday having a poll result from UNH, you may have seen, Kitty Toll has outraised virtually every one of us, and yet she was, I believe, 23 points behind David Zuckerman. It's probably just a coincidence that this morning I woke up with the Beatles song, Can't Buy Me Love. But I gotta tell you, the only way you're gonna combat that is to ignore the money problem and work your tail off. That's how you get it. You have to prove to people you are worthy of the position. You're not gonna leave them a good impression if you get the feeling like you are entitled to the position. So I'll say again, get out there on the corner of Route 9 and Route 5 and wave like crazy. You know the hot spots for every artery in this county, and you've got to be at those hot spots, even in the rain, because the people driving by will eventually say, you know what, I may not agree with that guy, but he's really working and I appreciate that. That's how you combat that.
Rick, asymmetrical campaign finance is the least of our problems. Asymmetrical media, asymmetrical 501c3s, nonprofits are the real problem, because the media poo-poos every Republican candidate. We don't forget about getting bad coverage. I'm happy when I get bad coverage, because most of the time I get no coverage. It's really god awful. You have nonprofits like VT Digger, who shouldn't even have their 501c3 exemption, which means that they should be nonpartisan. Well, good Lord. But WCAX, I don't know what your channels are down this way, but Burlington Free Press, the Brattleboro Reformer, the White River Junction, what's the paper there out of White River? Not the Valley News. I mean, you know, on and on and on. Maybe the Caledonian might be a little bit towards center, but most of these papers are just wildly liberal, wildly democratic, and this is the real problem. I don't care how much money you're spending on getting that midnight ad on WCAX. The problem is when you open your newspaper and the Republican candidates aren't even being found, except good old Mike here in True North and what's the other half of that? Guy Page and all of his operations. But other than that, I mean, that's playing to the choir, unfortunately, you know, and you know, the people that are out there that are really seeking for answers aren't even hearing our answers to the questions. So money, you know, money's an issue, but money doesn't walk into the polling place and score up the card. Money doesn't do that. And if we can get ourselves to talk to our neighbors and inspire them, that's how we're going to win this thing.
So on the money issue, I think it's very important. As I was talking earlier, we're in a very unusual place in the national races, as some of the Republicans in Senate races are not performing as they should, especially in Pennsylvania. And so the Senate is trying to figure out how to get to a 51 majority. On my drive over from Manchester, I was contacted by a Senate committee, basically in the Trump orbit, who promised me $2 million if I get through the primary. They feel that I'm the right person to take the message on the economy and on crime, and that I'm not liberal and I'm not too conservative, I'm not too extreme. I'm the right person to take the message against Welsh. So I'll have the money to contest Welsh. And in their words, they will carpet bomb Vermont with money. And they want a fight up here, and they want to take Welsh down. He's weak, he's not a member of the progressive tribe. They see that he can be defeated. And that's what I want to do. And I want to make sure that we have a Republican contesting that fight, and I want to make sure that I'm the person taking our values to Washington.
Does anybody else have any questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
Well, let's get you a microphone so we can hear you.
So professionally.
I want to hear her too, you know?
I want to thank the folks, the candidates that have come all the way down to Whitingham. We're
My
almost
pleasure.
on. I'm about 1.5 miles from Row, Massachusetts, and one of the candidates came down twice, and then we had another one that's been twice and came down and surprised us with Mr. Malloy. And we're a very small town. We have Republican voters, and we want to thank them for coming down and recognize us. You've got to remember that there is a southern Vermont that's below Route 4. I'm a Vermonter. I grew up here. I knew when I was a little kid how everybody laughed at southern Vermont stopped at Route 4. And I've lived in Whitingham for X amount of years. I won't tell you how old I am. And it was a great honor for us little folks to have Gerald Malloy and where's Rick Morton come and visit us. And they were at the Whitingham Community Church. And there was a lot of grateful people. They don't understand or recognize, I hope, but know that there's a lot of them out there that's going to vote for them. And I thank them.
Can I just make a suggestion? For those of us who live in the Northeast Kingdom, now I know where Whitingham is because I completed the 251 Club, and I'm just scrolling through my pictures because I did take a picture in your town, but I don't know anybody in Whitingham. It would be very helpful if you are in fact planning any kind of an event to reach out. We will come, but we have to have a better organization. That's one of the things the Democrats are doing much better than we are. We don't have the kind of networking that they do, and if you are willing, please do reach out to me if you've got something coming. I will make a special effort to drive the roughly 3 hours and 45 minutes to get there.
Are you willing to come in for 5 or 10 people?
I'll come for 5 or 4 people, because that's, I mean, Rick asked the question, how do we get past this money issue? It's by face-to-face conversations. I've been to coffee klatches that have less than 5 people. I am willing to go every chance that I get. So please, if you've got 2 or 3 people who are willing to gather and listen to me pontificate, I am going to come down. I will take advantage, I promise.
Okay.
By the way, my card is out there. It's got my cell phone number on it. Oh, here.
We really do, as candidates, appreciate when you gather, because what we do is we tell you where we stand, and you make the decision. But we ask that you go out and you talk to other people that didn't come. And I realize that there are people that might want to come that were working and they couldn't come, or they're just not that interested in sitting through 3 hours of political conversation, but they do go vote. Being an informed voter is very important, very, very important. And I ask that tonight you share with people what you've learned and talk to people and encourage them to vote, because that is how we take back our country. We have to vote. And we talk about election security, and we talk about securing the border and law enforcement and military and all of these things. It doesn't matter what we talk about if we can't actually get elected to make the change that we're talking about. And that's my goal. I actually am not a great campaigner, okay? Well, thank you, but no, like my strong point is not going around and talking about what I will do, what I will do, what I will do. My strong point is actually doing it, and I will get out and I will do it. And you won't be sorry if you elect me to the U.S. House of Representatives, because I will represent Vermont and the voice of the people. I encourage anybody who hasn't asked a question or has some questions that they want to learn to go to my website, AnyaTinoForCongress.com. You can even private message me through there. Give me about 2 weeks and I'll get back to you. I'm running about that late on responses at this point, just because I can't legally text and drive. So I'm driving constantly. I'm talking to people. But events like this are so important, and going even to the smallest town. I'm from a small town. I'm from Charleston, Vermont. If anybody even knows where that is, which I know Joe does because he's yes. It's a tiny town. It's a tiny town that has a store and a post office connected to each other, and it's one building that constitutes the town. So I have nothing against rural Vermont. I grew up on a farm. I care about agriculture. We need to get back to independent agriculture. We need to be energy independent. We need all of these things. And we're just kind of having like a freewheeling conversation at this moment. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I know that we have a time limit. Are we getting kicked out here?
The answer is no, we're not being kicked out, but we are at the end of what we'd scheduled. And so in a way, what you just said was a summation, and the numbers are starting to dwindle because people are headed out. I so appreciate you coming. I want to appreciate the Farkases for hosting. Did an awesome job. There is an offering plate back there. We've had a couple of donations that have been put in there. If you can do something that's helpful, there's a book table out there that helps the Windham County Republicans. Randy didn't bring any books, so I can't sell them. All right. And I'm sure any of these candidates that you feel like, yeah, I'm voting for you, they probably could use some financial help. However you want to do that. And so maybe what we could do is sort of have a sum up at this point, last shot. And you want to start that off?
Sure, I'll be super brief. Rick and Randy, thank you. This has been great. Appreciate everybody coming out and spending several hours here. And it's great to see the other candidates. And what I said earlier, please get out and vote. And for Vermont, for America, it's very important. We are in a war, and the country's going in the wrong direction. So appreciate your interest and support. Thank you.
I pretty much said what I was going to say, so I just encourage you to get out and vote. My name is Anya Tino. If you have any questions or need to know more about me, please reach out. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
So I'm going to leave with this offer. Should I actually get elected to the position of lieutenant governor? The lieutenant governor's office is on the corner of the west wing of the State House, which is the door that most people who are visiting the State House come through first. In other words, that office is the first thing you see. I have made the promise that that door will always be open. And my offer to you is, should you come, I don't care what your political beliefs are. If you've never been to the State House, I will personally take you on a tour. It is a wonderful place to visit. Bring your families, whatever the case may be. It is something that I love to do, and I love to educate people about the value of our history. And the State House is a wonderful place to do that. If you want to learn more about me, my name is Joe Benning. It's easy to find me. It's joebenning.com. Can't get any easier than that. And I do promise that if you call me and say, I want you to come down here, face people who are adamantly opposed to a position I've taken, I'll come. And I want to have those conversations. I want to earn your vote. That's very important. Thank you very much for coming out tonight.
And just so you don't miss him, Joe's office number is room number 14, if I remember correctly. Thank you very much, Rick and Randy, for having this. If others of you are having events, come and find me. I'll give you, I have lots of little cards printed up that have my entire campaign on the back. Get out and vote. Drag your neighbors to vote. You know, maybe circle the graveyard once or twice. Oh, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. But let's get everybody out. As somebody said earlier, our voter participation amongst those that identify with Republicans is like 40%. If we could like double that, I think we'd be in a lot better shape. In any case, my name is Brooke Page. I'm all over the primary ballot. Hopefully I'll only have 2 slots in the general election and only 1 slot nationwide. Oh, by the way, I'm also running for Justice of Peace, as I always do in the little town of Washington, Vermont. God bless you all, and safe journeys home.
Again, my name is Myers Mermel, and I want to thank Rick and Randy for sponsoring this very important forum tonight. And I'm happy to come to Whitingham anytime I'm invited. I do think about what we discussed tonight, where we heard from some of the candidates saying, you know, you've got to suck it up, you're not doing enough, you need to do more. And it reminded me when I was a small child, I think, I must have been 1st or 2nd grade, I went to a Christmas Mass, and the priest stood up and he literally yelled at the congregation for 20 minutes that they didn't show up the rest of the year. And I thought, why is he yelling at us? We're here. We're the ones that showed up. It's the people that didn't show up that deserve to be castigated. So you're the active ones. It's the people that aren't here, right? There of 20,000 primary voters, maybe there are 1,000 active people, activists in the state of Vermont. There are probably 15,000 people that really just don't come to the very end. So I want to thank you for all that you do. Without you building the party at the local level, and without doing all the things that you do, we wouldn't have a party. We're a small group, and we need to expand. So thank you for all the work that you've done, and God bless you.
And I'd like all the candidates to applaud the audience here, who have been so good to come to see us.
Couple of quick, thank you very much. As we're ready to leave, I just have a couple of things I want to mention. Please take this literature. It has to do with Proposition 5. The reason I'm running for state senator is because it gives me a platform to oppose this, which is kind of evil. I'll use that word, evil. In connection with that,
vote Rick into the state senate, though.
Yeah.
You get a good senator.
Yeah, I'm still running to win. The other thing is, Vermonters for Good Government are looking for people in every polling place throughout the state, and that includes all of them in in Windham County to be willing to take a few hours at the polling place to hand out literature like this, but they're having some others printed up specially. So as voters leave the primary ballot, leave the primary location, you can hand them, hi, with a smile. You don't have to engage, you just hand it to them. If you can talk to them, fine, but you don't have to. We're looking for volunteers to do that throughout the county and throughout the state. So if that's something you say, well, I can do that, then it's only when they leave. You can't give it to them when they go in. So
I think a lot of people need to understand the only reason why you can do that is because it's not on the primary ballot.
it's not on the primary ballot. We're going to vote in November. So the primary, this is not an issue for primary. This is an issue for November.
Because otherwise they don't let you pass out, you know.
Right.
Well, within 70 feet of the pole.
Yeah. Thank you, one and all. Thank you for coming. And have a great summer, great home. And what happens on November, on